And welcome to this course on learning advanced TypeScripts the React way. What I mean by this is that I'm going to teach you how to use TypeScript features in a React-friendly way. Being advanced in TypeScript, specifically in ReactJS project, does not mean developing a large TypeScript codebase with lots of complex type signatures flying everywhere in your codebase. In fact, in order to use TypeScript with ReactJS, you need to let TypeScript handle the types for you as much as it can, and only you should step in and define the signatures that TypeScript cannot figure out on your behalf. In this course, I will walk you through several demo projects in order to show you a set of real-world challenges that you may face when developing React apps using TypeScript. First, we review some basics. I will teach you how to define or how to make use of IntelliSense in VS Code specifically to reverse engineer the types that TypeScript cannot find. Several common challenges such as typing props, defining signatures for children, and also some basic type helpers will be examined, so you learn how to migrate a React component from JavaScript to TypeScript with comfort. Next, we touch on typing states. We will solve some challenges related to defining state hooks, mainly by useState, by demonstrating a demo project and managing its state by making use of TypeScript features. After that, we examine reducers and action types. We will implement a reducer for a demo project and try to fix some of the issues and conflicts that arise with TypeScript and reducer patterns. Concepts such as passing dispatch actions as props and using template literals for defining type signatures will be also examined. Right after that, we will build context API to share some props, and of course, we will see how we can have an efficient implementation of context API with TypeScript. We also talk about generics in TypeScript and demonstrate them for you by creating a custom context API to enhance our code. Finally, we will examine some more advanced TypeScript concepts and patterns as they can help you solve TypeScript-related ReactJS issues. By the end of this course, you will be confident to showcase your skills in TypeScript as a React developer by being able to write efficient and robust React components without falling in the trap of building unnecessary types and duplicate boilerplates. Okay, so what do we need before we start the course? First of all, you will need a working machine. Of course, all of you have that. But first, seriously, you will need a Node.js installed in your machine because for one of the demo projects, we are going to have a very small server.js file which contains a backend API written in Node.js and Express. Don't panic, you're not supposed to know anything about the Node.js stuff. It's just having Node installed in order so you can run that server.js file, okay? Then we will need the npm, of course, if you want to use the resources I'm going to attach to each lecture, for example, doing npm install, you will need that npm. And of course, for starting a new project of your own. Then for the editor, I'm going to go with VS Code. All of us know that it's the most common and widely used editor for React projects. So we're going to use Mixed because it has some features like we're going to see in the lectures like why VS Code is seriously good for TypeScript, especially with the React applications. And the internet connection I'm mentioning in here is because for some of the lectures, we are going to play with some basic, or let me say, some TypeScript features that are not going to be kind of React components, very generic TypeScript concepts. For that, I believe I am going to use a website like TypeScriptPlayground.org. So for that, maybe you want to try it yourself on that website. So internet connection can be something good and useful. Okay, so if you have all of this list, you will be good to go. Hello everybody and welcome back. Let's start our course and talk about the TypeScript. So in this code sample that we have in here, basically in this components folder, we have this subfolder called class info. We're going to talk much about this during the section, but if you go to this file class.info, there is a very small question I want to ask you. Is this class info file this code that we are looking at technically, is it TypeScript or JavaScript? Well, if you say yes, then you are completely correct, because here we have this small t, which is the t for TypeScript. It's not J. So it is not JavaScript, it's TypeScript. Yeah, but the rest, if you look at this code, it's completely JavaScript, but that's fine. You should say it's TypeScript because it's residing inside a TSX file. Yeah, funny. So what else? The very main point I wanted to mention in this lesson is that the TypeScript itself does its best to figure out the type of each element. You only need to help TypeScript whenever it cannot figure out the type of an element on your behalf by itself. For example, there's a very nice and cool feature of VS Code. If you hover over, for example, class info in here, it will show you that, hey, this class info is an element of, actually the type of it is just a function that returns JSX elements, and it is completely correct because this class info in here is just a function returning these JSX JavaScript inside the HTML inside JavaScript, things like that. So basically, what I'm trying to say in here is that TypeScript is very much powerful and enhanced. It does the business by its own as much as it can. For example, for this class info. And also, it gets help of the VS Code. So by hovering over some of the elements in here, like this class info, you will see that it shows you the type of this function, class info, and what it returns. Just do some fun stuff over here to show this point a little bit further. For example, we have a, let's say test function. We say test function that only returns a very simple number. Let's say 5 minus 3, okay? Let's hover over it, this test function, and see, oh yeah. So it says it's just this test function is a function that returns a number, and that's correct. So let's change this number into a string. For example, let's say this is a string. If you hover over again, okay, it respects the change we made. So the main point in here that you need to remember that TypeScript is very nice and cool friend. It does its best to figure out and analyze the code we have and detects the types. In case it doesn't detect it, okay, it's not, figurable for it, that's where you step in as the TypeScript developer hero and fix it for it. Hello and welcome back. In this video, we want to talk about how to specify the type of the props of a functional component. For that, first of all, let's get back to our app.tsx in here. So as you can see, we are using this class info or course info. Just name this function like this. Let's give it, for example, as you can see here, I am displaying the instructor, my name in here. I want to give it as or receive it as a prop. For doing that, we simply say, for example, the name is like that. Fine, but as you can see here, TypeScript immediately got angry at us. If you hover over here, it simply is trying to say that, hey dude, you told us that this function is not going to receive any arguments, but right now you are giving it a prop. What's going on here? And that is completely normal. For fixing this, we simply need to get back to our functional component and tell it, hey, I want you to receive a prop called name. And if you get back in here, the error is gone. But, oh, as you can see, TypeScript is still mad at us. It says, well, now that you are receiving props, if you hover over this class info, it says, yeah, I know that you are having a functional component in here which returns JSX. I know what it returns, but what about the props, which you are calling it or naming it as name? Now, I don't know the type of this name. You should tell me. As you can see, it is any in here. It should be any. Okay, so here you can see that TypeScript is not smart enough to analyze and detect the type of the input prop. Okay, it only knows the type of the return statement. For here, you need to step in and tell it the type of this name. The very simple way of doing this, as you can see in this example from the previous lecture, we had this test function which returns a string. Imagine that I want to say like this. Let's change, instead of this, I say n plus 1. Okay, now this n is going to be received as a prop. And for this n, if you want to specify the type of this input n, you simply say like this. It's going to be a number. Okay, that's simple. So for doing this, let me just get rid of this one in here. And for the props, you need to remember one thing. For TypeScript, the props are only objects. So as defining the type of each object, you need to define the type of each key value. In here, in this object that you can see, this props object, we have only one key, which is named name. For doing this, you simply need to say it has this name, which is string. And as you can see, now TypeScript is completely happy, and you should be happy also, because now we have everything in place, and also the type of the prop is defined like this. If you have more props, like let's say name and course, for example, you simply need to get in this type object in here and give it, like, for example, the course is also string and blah, blah, blah. So let me just get rid of this. I don't need it for now. If you are completely confused in here, it's very normal, because you say, props are objects for TypeScript. What does that mean? Well, the other way of doing this is that saying, okay, so I have props, and that's simple. Okay, so you can also do it like this, all right? But if you prefer this way, which is usually standard way, you will face it a lot in the code bases. There is one small issue with this. Okay, and you maybe have thought about it. You say, what if we have a long list of props? Are we going to define everything inside of here? Well, they're going to be a mess. It's going to grow a lot. For doing this, there is a basic and standard approach for defining the types for a list of props that we are going to receive. You only need to use the keyword type. Okay, and after type, you need to mention the name of the component, which is class info. In here, we say class info, and it's a very standard approach. You don't need to follow it, but it's to add the props at the end, so you know what it means. What is this type? It is the type of the props of the class info component, and you simply need to just get this from here, cut it, and paste it just like this. And in here, you simply need to mention the class info props. Okay, so this is how you fix it exactly. If you have a lot of props in here, a long list, you simply mention the type of each one in here, and you only need to mention the type name, which is class info props. Don't forget these name conventions. Of course, you don't need to follow it. That's not mandatory, but it's just a standard practice like this. Okay, so now you know how to define the types of the props of a component in TypeScript. Okay, time for some practice. If you look at this folder in here in the components, we have this settings folder. In this directory, we have a dummy JavaScript file. I'm calling it settings in here. What we are going to practice is, I want you to convert this JavaScript file into a TypeScript file. Okay. As you can see in here, this dashboard component is receiving two props, input name and handle change. They are being used in this JSX codes in here. And currently, we are defining the types of these two props using these prop types. This is how we do it in JavaScript. So first, I have some agenda for you. In case you want to follow the steps for this practice, I'm going to pause the video, give you some time, try to do the changes yourself, and get back to this video and see how I do it. So if I want to paste it in here, the first step is that you need to change the file extension of this settings.js from JSX or the JS to TSX. Then I want you to change and convert these prop types in here and do it the standard TypeScript way of defining the type of the props, which we learned in the previous video. After that, I want you to define the type of the change handler. As you can see in here, we have this change handler, and it's being put or passed to this unchange of this input. Okay, so try to figure it out yourself. If you couldn't succeed in that, that's pretty fine. I'm going to show it myself in here. And the last step I want you to take as a practice is that in our old class info component, I want you to add another prop. So in here, first of all, let me change this into name, so we are consuming the previous prop. I want you to add another prop, which is going to be like this. Let's say the course, okay, something like this. I just wanted to add it in here, and of course we're gonna have to do some other stuff to learn them based on that. All right, so pause the video here, go and do these exercises and get back to me and see how am I going to do it, so you learn some new stuff. Okay, welcome back. So I assume you have done it yourself. For doing the changes, first of all, let me just yeah, this is fine in here. Let me close this one. The first step is that we need to change the file extension. So in this JS file settings, I'm going to say rename. I'm simply doing it from inside the VS Code. So I say simply tsx, and as soon as you do that, the TypeScript is going to go red and mad on us, and that's completely fine. We saw that in a previous video. First, we need to define the types of these two props in here. For doing that, I'm going to follow the standard practice by saying type, and we set the name of the component, which is dashboard, followed by props. And then inside curly braces, I'm going to say the input name, which is, I'm going to just copy paste everything from here. This is going to be string. It's just a simple name. And then for the handle change, just to get rid of this error, because yet we don't know what to put as a type for it, I'm going to say any. And for that, simply need to consume it. I say dashboard props. Yay! So now we don't have that much of any errors. I just need to remove this because we don't need it anymore, and we should be good to go. So now everything's fine, right? Well, not completely. You know, TypeScript is fine. It's not mad or red, but what about this any in here? Yet we don't have to put anything. Well, that's fine, you can go with it, but that's really, if you want to get rid of the TypeScript and use the any so early, that's not what we are trying to learn this course. So let's try to find out what to put as a type for this handle change prop. For doing so, if you remember at the beginning of the course, I told you that you can use that simple hover over things. So we are going to pass this handle change, okay, to this unchange, okay. So let's just hover over this unchange, and as you can see that unchange here, we are seeing some stuff over here. First of all, we have this react.input.html attributes. Basically, this react.input.html attributes, it refers to the input itself in here, okay. And after that, we have, let me just give it back again. Okay, here we have the unchange with this question mark. This question mark means that the unchange attribute, which is attached to the input, okay, in here, is optional. It can be either undefined, you know, we're not, if you don't pass anything to this unchange, it will be undefined. Or if you want to pass something to it, it needs to be something of react.change event handler of this type. So this is exactly the type that we need to give to this handle change in here. So let me just copy paste it simply instead of this any, like this. So yeah, that's simple. By using the VS Code help, we simply found out this long and weirdly looking type that we have in here. If you want to make this even shorter, you can just get rid of this React from here, and instead, I don't need these prop types anymore. We can save it like this. We can simply import it. I say import change event handler, and it is now shorter. Okay, so let's get back to the list. We have changed it. We have also converted these prop types, and also we have defined the change handler type. Let's just get rid of it. The last thing is that to add a new prop to the class info. So I close this and get back to the class info in here, and I'm going to add a new prop. I'm going to call it the course, okay? And simply here, I need to say the course is going to be another string, and here is where I am going to consume it. I'm going to say course. Getting back in here, you see we have some angry TypeScript says, hey, you are expecting to receive another prop, which is called the course, okay? I'm going to pass it like this, and we should be good to go, okay? So now I want to make it optional. This is why I told you to add this new prop in here. What about I want to make this with a default value? For doing that, you can simply say here, for example, let's give it default value of same as this one in here. Okay, so this is a default value. If you don't pass anything to this course as a prop, okay, it's going to have this default value. For example, let's remove it from here. I want to show you something. Oops, we get an error. It says, hey, I still expecting another prop which is called course. Where is that thing? Oh, so we need to make this course to be optional. For doing so, it's very simple. You can add an okay, no, sorry, not here. This is not the place. For making a prop optional, you need to do that question mark. If you remember from the other file in settings and the on change, you need to get back to the types where you define the types of that prop, which is in here. We say simply question mark after the course. If you get back in here now, the error is gone and we have an optional prop with a default value in here like this. Welcome back, everybody. So in this video, we are going to start with a practice. I have an exercise for you. So first of all, here you can find this code as the boilerplate, the starter of this session, attached to this lecture. We have a very simple app.tsx file in here, which is calling another component. The component is very simple. As you can see, it is named card. It receives these children as props. And in here, we have this React component receiving several props, the children. Here we have a string, we have a paragraph, and also we have more than one other React component, which is of the same type, receiving as the children in here. What you should notice about this children prop is that it can be a string, a primitive, like string or a number, and also it can be another React component, as you can see in the app.tsx. And also, it can receive more than one child. Plus, it can be another HTML element, such as this paragraph, the P in here. What is the practice? Well, the practice for you is that I wanted to get rid of this any keyword in here. I wanted to figure out a specific type that we can use it to specify that this prop, this children, can receive another React component as a prop, including another primitive like string, number, or even another HTML tag, plus another React component. How can we do that? What should we place instead of this any? All right, you can pause the video for a few seconds, think about it, and get back to me so we find out about the solution or solutions for this practice. Okay, welcome back. So let's see what can we place. The first thing that we may have is that saying JSX dot an element. Well, this can work, and perhaps if you take a look at the app.tsx, there's something mad. TypeScript is yelling at us. It says, well, the JSX tags children prop expects a single child. So the problem with this JSX.element is that it only accepts a single child. Okay, we cannot give it an array of children and stuff like that. So this is not going to be the solution. How to fix it? Well, maybe you can go with this by saying JSX.element and give it an array. And now, well, you can see another problem, I believe. Well, things are still red. What is that? Oh, so this is now accepting more than one child using this type that we defined in here. But the problem is that it does not allow primitives such as the string that we have in here. So this is going to be removed from the list of solutions. The other thing that you may want to consider is the React child, which is deprecated for now, and you can give it like this perhaps. Although it's just deprecated, I just wanted to show you for a second in here. The problem with this approach is that it does not allow a single React component or a single child to be received. So again, this is not the case. So which one is the winner? Well, this is the winner. You can say React node. Yes, that's it. Or simply you can just do it like this to keep it cleaner and import it from React on the top in here. So React node is the hero for us. It's going to allow us to include or receive multiple children as the props. Also, it is going to allow us to receive primitives like strings and numbers. beside this one, there's also a built-in utility that we can use whenever we want to tell TypeScript that this component is going to receive children's along with the props. And that's it using, let me just get rid of this from here. And this one, it's basically saying props with children. That's simple. This means this is telling TypeScript that this component is going to receive props along with children. Now a question arises here. It says, whatever, if we want to extend this and we want to include some other props, like for example, let's say that we want to have some kind of, styling or things. Like if you go to the browser in here, you will see that this is the style that we have. Perhaps you want to change the color. For example, you want to say in here, I have style, and inside of it, I want to say the color is, let's say, red, for example. Let's just check it's working. Yeah, red. I want to receive a prop named or called color so that I can dynamically change the color of the text inside this section here. How to do that? So let's say, for example, you want to say it like this, color, and you want to give it a default value of, let's say, blue, for example. All right. Now it is yelling at us. It says, hey, I'm not sure with this. Declare it for me. This is where you need to step in. OK, TypeScript is confused, doesn't know what color is. So for including this or extending this props with children, here's what you're going to do. First, you need to create a type for your card. So we're going to say type and name it as the standard again. First, the name of the component is card, and then we say props. Okay, and then inside of it, I'm going to say I am going to receive a prop called color, and its value also, it is going to be optional. Perhaps you don't want to send a color to your card. Okay, so give this question mark like this, and we have mentioned it in a previous lecture. And the values of the color can be like, let's say, crimson, I believe it's a color in HTML, or it can be, let's say, green perhaps, and also the other color we can go with brown. Okay, and now the other thing you need to do is that with props with children, you simply need to extend it like this. You need to introduce the card props to the props with children inside these code braces in here, saying card props like that. And of course, it's yelling at us because it says, hey, you have given this color a default value, which is not one of the default, or I believe the types that color can include. So to fix this, you can change it to crimson, or instead of this green, you can say blue, like this. Okay, so now we can simply remove this color from here, and instead of hard coding it, we are going to say the color to be the color. Nope. Because we have the same, we just can keep it like this and we should be good to go. So the default is blue. It's going to be blue, I believe. Yeah, it's working. Fine. So as a recap, this is how you receive or how you declare the type of a prop, which can be another React component, or it can be, in other words, children. Okay, so using these props with children or the React node, as we mentioned. But if you want to have some other props other than the children, you maybe prefer to go with props with children. This is how I do it in the project. It's just a common practice actually, and by defining the types of your components, such as the card props in here, you can include whatever other primitives and non-primitives props inside of it, and simply extend the props with children using that type, and you will be good to go. So in the previous video, we said that if you want to receive children as props, you can go with these props with children as the type of your props, and it's gonna take care of that. And we also mentioned that if you want to expand it and add other props, this is how you can do it, by simply saying, for example, type button props, for example, and then you can specify an object like this. For example, here I have a button. For every button, we have the onClick, correct? It needs to be a kind of function. So what is the type that we want to receive in here? Let's say it is also called the onClick. We need to define the type of the onClick and expand it to the props with children. And this onClick is going to be consumed on this button element in here. For that, it's very simple. You can simply say the onClick or just copy paste it from here. Okay, this is going to be a function which return void, something like this. Okay, and in here I'm just going to say onClick once again, and of course you need to extend it like this by saying the button props, or by simply moving this from here. I'm just going to show you something a little bit easier in here, and let's just open this and close it like this. And in here, instead of this whole mess, we are going just to mention the button props like this. Okay, this is just a cleaner way of doing things. So basically now everything we have learned it so far, nothing new. We just expanded the props with children. But there is one thing it says that, for example, for this case in here, the whole thing that we are returning is a button, correct? And for every button, for example, button can be any other HTML element, we have some set of predictable props like the onClick, like the type of the button and stuff like that. Is there a way that we can perhaps tell TypeScript about it instead of writing everything? For example, I'm going to have a type for my button, and so I have to do it again in here. I say type blah blah blah, go in here and extend it. That's going to be very more, the list is going to go on and on. So long story short, yes, we have an option instead of another utility helper. To be more specific, we can use it instead of these props with children. So instead of doing it like this, you can say component props. Let me just paste it in here. Yeah, I was wrong with my VS Code. Anyway, let's just paste it in here. And now it is called component props without ref. You should be able to import it from React using your VS Code and simply. And after that, whatever element that you have, for example, here we have a button. Can go ahead and say, I want everything from the button. It means if you put this button props in here, you are telling TypeScript that for this component we are expecting to receive, or optionally, every single prop or the feature that we need for this button. Where? Like this, because okay, if you have anything else, you can just put the name in here, but here we have a button. Okay, that's how we do it. If you have a select, for example, you can just go ahead and do this select, but let's just give it the button here. So basically now I don't need to mention any of this in here like the other example that we had in that object. And I can simply say onClick type, and let me just write it in here. I say type like this, and as you can see, TypeScript is not yelling at me. It doesn't say, hey, what is this type? Nowhere you told me about it. Why? Because in here we told it that, hey, everything I'm going to receive in here after the children, of course, I am going to receive the features or the props related to the button, and it checks the button, says, you need an onClick, you will need a type, blah, 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 and things like that, and everything will be happy. So using this feature, now the button component has all the props, same as the native button. Okay, whatever this receives as a props, now this button component that we have is going to have those props, thanks to the component props without ref, using these kind of settings. Hello everybody, welcome back. So in this video we want to talk about the use state and see if we have any challenges, or basically how can we set the default types of use state or any kind of types that we may face during the use state inside TypeScript. That's simple. So here we have this app.tsx, very simple. We have this shopping cart component. In this shopping cart, if I want to show you in the browser in here, you can simply increase, reset, decrease, and stuff like that. We have this functionality, but yet we don't have the functionality for these two things. I will give that as an exercise to you. So let's walk through that. In the shopping cart, we have, first of all, a very simple state that says items. Okay, it starts with a default value of 0. Okay, and then we have some kind of very basic JSX stuff in here, like the H1 in here. As you can see, we have a few buttons for the increase, decrease, and each of them, as you can see, we have the onClicks, which call the set items. It removes it decrease it by 1 or sets it to 0 for the reset button. And for the increase, of course, it says set items in here with +1. The thing in here that says, well, we have a tsx file. This is supposed to be a TypeScript code, right? Does it look like TypeScript? Well, in the first look, you may say, no, that's JavaScript, but seriously, people, take it easy. This is TypeScript. Why? Because I told you TypeScript is smart enough. Right now, it can discover what kind of types we have in here. What do I mean? For example, you just need to hover over these items in here, and as you can see, TypeScript itself detected it as a number. It said that this is going to be a number, well, based on the initial state that we gave it in here. And also, if you hover over this set items, it also says that this is a dispatch blah blah blah. It's just a function that receives a number. Okay, so we didn't need to step in and tell TypeScript that this set items is a function that receives a number. And don't be confused by this set actions blah blah blah, things like that, because set state and user state is basically a wrapping, an abstraction over the user reducer. Okay, so that's it. So as you can see in here, we didn't have to define any types, and TypeScript was smart enough to figure out things for us. But I have an exercise for you. Right now, we can in here increase, reset, and decrease the value of the shopping cart. The practice I have for you, down in here, we have a small, beautiful form like this. Okay, here we have the onSubmit, and also we have this input. Okay, I want you to do something for me. First of all, I want you to update the value of the card whenever we enter a value in here by hitting this update counter. You can see it in here, this button. Okay, so you need some kind of unchange for this one, for this input. So when you type something, perhaps you need to add another state in here just to keep a record of the value inside this input. And perhaps you want to create a submit. You know, in here, whenever you submit, you hit this button, something needs to happen here. So the value of the items will be updated based on the value of that, let's call it input items that you can create. Okay, pause the video for a few seconds, and whenever you figure it out, just see if you face any challenges and get back to me and we do it together. Welcome back. So let's see how to fix those exercises. First of all, we need to create a state to keep the value of this input in here. Let's just do it like this, saying const, let's call it the input items, you know, because after all, they are the items, but coming from the input, something like that. It's just a naming convention in here. So input items and set input items. Okay, and also it's going to be user state, and as the initial state you can simply give it items if you like, or you can give it 0, whatever you like. So if you hover over this input item once again, it's saying it's a number, and this is of course a function receiving a number. Okay, now whenever we type something, we wanted to update the value of this input item. For doing that, simply in this input, I come down in here. First of all, let's change the value of this input by saying that it needs to be the input items. Oh, it needs to be with S. Yeah, now it makes sense. And for the onChange, I am going to simply say A and set input items. And inside of this, okay, if you give it a string, TypeScript is going to yell at you and says, hey, this set input items was going to receive a number, but now you are giving it a string. Let's just remove it and see if we face anything further. Let me just do it like this. And for the onChange, I'm going to say e.target.value. And we have another error. Why? Because after all, the value, even if you type it, is finally a string. If you want to change it, you can simply give it a plus or parse integer, or you can say number like this and keep it inside of it. So we're going to give it like this. All right. So now if you change everything, one more thing we need to do in here is that for this submit, if you want to fix it, let me get back in here. Before we continue to that, let's just check this and verify that it's working. Okay, if you get back in here, well, you can type anything number. But as you can see, when you hit this, you cannot clean it, okay? You cannot make this an empty string. Why is that? It's because this number, this conversion that we are doing in here, it doesn't accept an empty, it doesn't understand empty string. Even if you give it an empty string, it will convert it to 0. So this number function is always going to return a number. If you give it an empty string, it gives you a 0. So how to fix this? There is a very easy solution and another solution using the TypeScript. For the TypeScript part, you can do it like this. First of all, this is a number, right? This is going to receive a number. How to fix it? We want to get rid of this number. We don't need to use it, right? So we need to specify the types ourselves. We need to step in here and, for example, tell this that, hey, you are going to receive a number. And for this, because in here, the e.target.value, okay, can be a string, we want to tell this that you are basically going to receive either a string or a number. And maybe you want to go with 0 at the beginning, doesn't matter, okay, like this. So what happened here? By doing this, by defining the type of the user state as string or number, down in here in the inputs, if you remove this number from here, this number function, this conversion, you see that TypeScript is not going to yell at you. Why? Because you tell it that this set input items is going to receive either a string, which is this case, or a number. Okay, so if you get back to the browser, if you clean this 0, oh, now we can simply get rid of it. But be careful for updating the as you can see here, we have this update thing. Whenever you want to submit the form, let's add another thing to it. For this part, okay, whenever you hit the update, we want to add the current value of the input items to the items themselves. I mean, take this and give it to this, so you update this one. That's simple. For doing that, I am going to say set items. And now in here, as you can see, it takes only a number. So I want to pass the input items, but there's a problem. See in here, it says the input items is either a string or a number, and this set items only receives number. Where? Because here we defined it in here. We said it only receives number. How to fix that? Here we can safely convert this into a number by saying, for example, number and set inputs. And now the error is gone. If you get back in here, we also can have an empty string, plus we can say like 45, and if you hit update counter, it's 45. If you increase it, decrease it, it's not changing. Let's see what's going on. So we did not use the use effect yet. One more thing we can do just to complete the example of this session is that whenever you change these item cards using the increase or decrease or reset, we wanted to update this. And this is basically, as you can guess, is a simple use effect. So we can say use effect, and we are going to listen to the items. Okay, so whenever the items change, I want to simply say set input items. I want to update the input items using the set input items with the value, which can be a string or a number, and I'm going to pass the items. If you save this, or of course you can make it a single line, if you like to keep things, clean. And so just keep it like the other way, just to confuse you for here. Let me just validate it first. Oops, we had an error. Just do a refresh, and if you increase it, yes, it is being updated. Reset. Fine. Now I want to show you a very easy, it's kind of a trick, if you don't want to use all these types in here. Let me show you a small, lovely trick. Let me just get it to the items, like the very beginning of the session in here. And let's assume that we are going to, in fact, we don't need this because it's a number also. Let me see if it works. And now we are back in the 0 point. It says, hey, you are giving it a string. It needs a number. Simply can change it. There is a built-in function or built-in feature in here that says value as a number. Click on that. get back in here, and as you can see, you can even get rid of it. See, increase, decrease, and let me just see the number 46, update. Yeah, okay, so that was a very small trick. I don't know whether you know about it or not, but you can say value as number, which means converting the value as a string to a number. Hello everybody and welcome back. So before we deep dive into the context of this session, let me explain some stuff for you. First of all, we have this book project example or example project, whatever you call it. We have some components, same as usual. We have these books. We have this books.tsx for displaying a list of books. Nothing too fancy, just, you know, things like that. You can have some even better components yourself, right? This is just for demonstration. And also we have this book.tsx for displaying a single book, which is the title and the author, stuff like that. And along with the CSS, you can check them for yourself. Plus we have this loader. You know, it's a small loading text which has some kind of animation. Before we load the data from the server, it is going to display, oh, we said server. What is server? Don't be afraid, okay? I know you are perhaps mostly a front-end developer and you don't want to mess with the backend, so simply I have included two files for you in here. First of all, in the root directory, this is the books.json. If you click on it, we have dummy a list of 20 books. They are very dummy actually. You know, for example, book 16, author 16, and etc. like this. We are going to consume this in another file called server.js. This is a very basic and simple Express a Node.js backend using the Express web server library in here. So it's going to run on port 4000, and also for installing it, you need to do the npmi if you are using the boilerplate of this session. So you install the Express.js, plus you need to have the Node.js installed on your machine so that you can run this server. It has very simple roots like this api.books, which returns a list of books. Also, it can get limit, offset, and you can go through that. We have some post, get, and even patch and delete stuff. And finally, it's going to run it this. Okay, so very simple. You can go ahead and walk through it and check it for yourself. If you want to follow along with me, please, whenever I use this book project example, try to make sure that in your terminal, okay, like in here, let me just clear it for you. I want you to do this, not, and make sure that you are in the root directory where the server.js file is included. And then you say server.js, hit enter. And oops, we got an error. I believe we need to do the npmi because yeah, I need to install the Express.js and include them. So let me do that for you, just like in practice together. So the code, let me paste it in here. You say npm install or npmi simply Express, and of course with this small library that we have in here, you don't need to worry about it. Hit enter and wait for it till it is being installed on the machine. Then you can run the server simply by saying not server.js, and yes, we are good to go now. The server is running on localhost 4000. Plus, before we proceed with that, you know, this is a kind of coarse problem. Always you need to fix it whenever you are using the localhost for calling a backend server. You need to say here proxy, and inside of it you say http localhost followed by the port of your backend server, which is 4000. Okay, you don't need to worry about this. It's just some settings I wanted to show you, and you have it in here. So I hope that we're not going to have any errors. In case, we are going to fix it together. So now we are ready to do requests to our server. I just explained it to you in here. Getting back to the app.tsx, we have this kind of type for the book we have included in here. It has an ID, a title, and of course the author. We said that it is going to be optional, and we have just these two functions in here for fetching a random book and fetching a specific book list with a limit, which is the count in here, as you can see. Plus, down in here, we have the actual component, which starts with the real thing. Now we get to the context of this session. Here we have this state which says book, set book, and use state, and at the very beginning of the render of this component we are having this use effect which fires by calling this fetch random book. It just fetches a random book as the name indicates, and then it says set book. But we have a problem in here. If you hover over this book in here, you see that TypeScript said that book is undefined, and that's completely true and natural because we didn't pass any initial state in it. Whenever you do fetch calls or any kind of request to a backend server, another machine, okay, there is a delay, okay, a few milliseconds and so on and so forth before you get or you fetch or you receive the actual data. But before that, we usually do a kind of check like this. We say, hey, before I have a book, if it's null or undefined, I wanted to show this loader, correct? But because we are using TypeScript for a purpose here, and that is for this use state, we cannot let it to be undefined. For solving it, perhaps the first thing that maybe comes to your mind is that we can put an object like this and say, hey, so we are going to have a title. Let's give it an empty string. You can see lots of legacy code actually like this. And also we have an author, which we give it an empty string. So whenever the fetch is done, the actual data is going to be placed in here. But before that, we are going to have this initial state value. But this is actually problematic. Why? Because number one, this is not going to be the case. It's not going to fire anymore because actually book has something inside of it. So you gotta do some, nested, more unclear solution to fix this logic. Plus, we have an optional entity in here, which is the author, okay? And using this approach, TypeScript is not aware about it. And even if you like it, it's going to cause some other problems. If you hover over book right now in here, you see that TypeScript has detected that this book type is something like this. It says the title is a string and the author is also string. So we can get some idea from this that for solving the problem as following the standard approaches, the right way is simply by giving it a type in here. So instead of this empty values, we can tell it that we are going to expect for this use state either a book type, as you can see from here, or we are going to expect the undefined. Oops, sorry, I just made a mistake in here. This is not supposed to be in here. It needs to be between these two braces. Okay, so now completely we are following the standards of TypeScript. Whatever is going to be actually fetched finally is going to be accepted by this setBook because it's going to be a type of book, or before that it will be undefined, and this will help us to have this kind of logic, showing a loader before the actual data is being fetched. Okay, so that was just another example of use state and kind of challenges that you may face, specifically in this case where you don't know what exactly to place as an initial state if you don't have it. All right, in the next video, I believe we're going to have some kind of more exercises for you. Hello, dear students, welcome back. So in this video, we want to have another exercise. We started with that, and then we're going to see the solution. But before that, as you can see in here, if I want to uncomment this piece of code, okay, and refresh the application, it's going to fetch a random book and display it in this book component. So let's get back and verify. Yes, refresh, and every time there is a book fetched and displayed in here. So my challenge for you is that, let me just get rid of this from here. You can use it later on. I want you to use this books component, which is in here, and it receives several props, and for now it is any. Okay, fine. So inside of it, we are going to display a list of books. Because we are not fetching anything, we are not going to need this. Let me just do a cleanup in here. Also, because in the form, let me just comment this and show you what we have at the beginning. Okay, let's refresh. Yes, we have this very small form. For example, you want to fetch 10 books. You hit load books and it's going to show you a list of those books. That's the idea. Okay, so because we have a button, of course we're not going to use this use effect. It's not needed anymore. And what else? Yes, this random also is extra, and so good. So all right, so the challenge for you is that I want you to go ahead and fetch the books from here. Let me just fix this in here. So we're going to fetch some books. All right, and also our state will be books and set books. And also this is not the case anymore. Let me just get rid of it. It's going to be an array. Okay, so when you hit the button, it's going to load. In fact, in here, when you hit this, it's going to call this function, okay, that you pass it for it inside of it like this in here. This is part of practice, and it sets the books, and after that you do a kind of looping in here. You say, for example, books.map, and inside of it it's going to give you, let's say, a book like this, and you are going to return another book. Ooh, with what's going on? Yo. Okay, so, and here, of course, for the book, you need to give it some, the title and, of course, the other properties. So you're going to say the title is very simple. I'm passing the title and the author, as you know, they are needed in this book. In here is the title and the author. That's why I'm passing them. But TypeScript starts yelling at me and says, hey, I don't know what the type is of this book. So I'm not sure whether it contains this title and author. Would you please help me with that? Well, yes, it's very simple actually. You need to specify the type for this use state, and we've done that already. It's very simple. First of all, we know it is an array, okay? So what array of what exactly? Array of this book type. So you simply say book type, that's it. So now it's done. The real business you need to do as in practice, okay, is that you need to figure out first how to send a count number, because in here, as you can see, you can fetch with a limit, okay, it receives a count, and you need to pass it along with a unsubmit and also an unchange, and of course take care of the children props type, okay, because right now everything is in type of any. This unchange is any, this count is also any, and that's not how things work. In fact, your mission is to pass these things, the unsubmit, unchange, count, and of course before that you need to specify their type in this books.tsx file. Okay, so I'm going to stop the video in here and see you in the next one and doing the solution together. Alright, welcome back. So let's do the practice that I told you in the previous video. The first thing is that we need the count in here, as you can see, how many books to fetch. For that, we need to add another state. We are going to call it the count and set count. And of course, it's going to be use state because the initial value we give it, for example, 10 or 5 or whatever number you like. The count is going to be of type number. And simply we can pass it like this. We say count equals count. Okay, so now count is passed correctly. And now we need to pass the unchange in here. So whenever we type something in this input, okay, it's going to update the count state in here. For that, it's very simple. Again, in this books, we are going to say unchange is going to be a kind of state like this. It receives the E and it says set count, because count is a number, okay? You simply need to say e.target, yes, that value, okay? You can give it this plus like this, okay? Or you can simply say value. What's going on with my screen in here? Let me just check it. Yeah, or simply you can say value as number. And this is getting this error, TypeScript is yelling at me because of I haven't yet fixed the types in this books.tsx. Okay, so let's get back in here. Instead of this any, I'm going to create a simple type in here saying type books props equals. First of all, I have this count, okay? It's going to be a number. Then I have on submit. We'll need to do some couple of imports. I say form. It's going to be a form event handler. Let me just paste it. Okay, so this is basically things, you don't need to memorize that. Actually, it's all in the documentations and everywhere. And we need to import this from React. So I say import this piece of thing from React. And we simply need to get this and put it inside of this. Also, for the onChange, we need to do a similar thing with a slight difference. And also, onChange is going to be, I believe, optional, and this one also to be imported. Okay, so now the onChange and onSubmit and counts are fixed in here. Let's use this type. Okay, so the first thing you may want to do it is something like this. You say books props, but very soon it yells at you and says, hey, what is children? Yeah, forgot about this. For doing that, it's very simple. We've done that already. We say props with, let me just copy paste again. My VS Code goes crazy sometimes. I need to do it manually. I'm just going to import it in here, props with children, and I'm going to say props with children, and inside of it in here I'm going to say book props. Save it. And okay, so what do we have in here? Also, I'm going to say onChange. First of all, let's get back in here and it says onSubmit. Okay, I will give you the onSubmit because it's not optional. In here, let's do couple of fixes. The onChange is wrong in here. It needs to be on. So I don't know why I've done that actually. So it's fixed in here. Whenever we submit the form, this onSubmit is being called, but we need to define the upSubmit also in here. So let's go for that. I am going to continue the way in here. I'm going to say onSubmit equals. Okay, so it's going to be a function like that, which calls the fetch books. Okay, and we need to give it the count, so it knows how many books to fetch for us. And then I say, actually, then it needs to say set books. So whenever it fetches them, it sets them all in the set books. Okay, I think we should be good to go now. To verify that, let's go to the browser. 0. Okay, let's give it. Okay, I want 3 books. Yo, we have the 3 books. Fine, I'm okay. Let's say 10 books, and it's doing it. And if you refresh, okay. So this is how, as a recap, this is how we pass the events and states in a TypeScript React application. I know there can be numerous ways of doing things. For example, this count maybe shouldn't be in here, shouldn't handled in here. It should be inside the books.tsx, because whatever the count changes, this parent component, this app component is going to re-render, and that means low performance. But this is not about performance, this course, and we are talking about specifically the TypeScript. So this is just, mentioning things in here, and as the practice was meant to show you how to pass these states and the event handlers, and how to more specify the types of them, and also define them for your corresponding. Hey everybody, welcome back. So if you remember in the previous video, I told you that using this approach in here for fetching the data and passing the count like this can have an one of the issue with it is that it has performance issue. Whenever the count in here updates, the whole app component, the parent component, is going to re-render, and all the child components are going to re-render as a result of that. So in case you want to fix it, I just decided to do that in this video and see how things work. We're going to see some challenges. Maybe you can learn some stuff from that. So the idea is here that we're not going to longer need this count in here, so we're going to remove it from this, and it's going to yell at us as, hey, it needs a count. This, a prop called count is required. So where's that? So I'm just telling you, we are messing with the code in here, and I am not really sure when these red yellings are going to stop, but we're going to do our best. So we're not even need these on submit, not even the on change. The only thing we are going to pass with books is actually the set books itself. So we're going to say set books equals something like this. Let's just keep it like this for now. Getting back to the books in here, books.tsx, we need to move the count in here. Okay, so I'm going to say const, I'm going to have count how many books you want to retrieve, and set count to be use state, use state, and we're going to give it the 10 value in here. And as you can see, there's a conflict, so we said we're not going to need this and also not this, and the only thing we are passing in here is this set book in here. Okay, what else we need to clean up in here? As we said, we're not going to need these as props, so let's get rid of them. We only have these set books in here. Okay, but what is the signature? What type should we specify for these set books? Do you remember I told you to stay dynamic? Okay, go and use the VS Code and ESLint thing to see and seek any help. Getting back to the app component in here, if you hover over this set book, as you can see, this is the signature of it. I know it's a long blah 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 thing in here. As we said, it's a wrapper of user deducer and things like that. There is absolutely no issue. It's completely fine, very well, that you can grab this from here, copy it, get back in here and paste it as the signature of this. Okay, and of course we can import this book. I think it's exported from here. Yes, so let's import this book type. Okay, and as you can see, now we have the signature of this set book up and set like this. So let's see what errors do we have. So for the on submit, we don't need it like this. As you remember, we have it in here like the fetch books. Okay, so let's import it from the app component, and it needs the count, and here we have the count as a state, so we just pass it to that, and we say then please call this set books function. What else do we have? Sounds like we have some kind of yellings from TypeScript. Yes, on the unchanged in here. So whenever the input changes, okay, we want to update the count. For that, we are going to say, whenever you change, I want you to do something like this. You say e, and then we say set count. And inside of it, because the count only takes a number, okay, we are going to say e dot target dot, and if you remember, instead of saying number and then wrapping the e dot target dot value with plus or a number, we say value as number. Yay. Okay, so let's fix everything back in this app. Yep, we just need to give it the set books. Let's see what we have in here. It says count is missing. Where is count? It shouldn't be in there. Let's get back. Oh yeah, it's in here. We just need to get rid of this, save it, and yeah, things ready. Let's go to the browser and verify that everything's working as expected. So let's say 5 books. Yay! Okay, so congratulations, it's working with the refactored version that we just did. So basically what we did in this lesson is that I showed you that the other way we talked about in case you want to do it, but the perfect way perhaps is still the first way. You can go with that, and no issues with that one. The other lesson that we learned, I want to emphasize, is also that, as you remember in here, when we were typing the signature of this function in here, set books, we did not need to do a lot of research or recall something from our own memories to get this piece of signature. We did a kind of reverse engineering. We went looking for the set books originally in here, and we just hover over it, and We got this, whenever in your project you have the variables or you have the elements defined, you can just simply refer to them and try to do some kind of reverse engineering and find out about the types, all right? That can help you a lot in writing or finding the proper signatures for defining the types of different things in your code base. So one more lesson, we saw how helpful can be TypeScript. Imagine that you run your codes in pure JavaScript, okay? And an error occurs. For fixing that, you have to navigate between your browser and your editor and the console log and stuff like that just to figure out a simple bug, the source of the error. But right now with the TypeScript, you have everything in place in the editor, okay? It tells you, it gives you hints about what is going on, what is wrong, and you simply can debug the codes. That's why it's a great idea to use TypeScript, and even to start every single code base you have initially with TypeScript, you need to get used to that. It's gonna save your life. Hello everybody, welcome back. So in this lecture we're going to talk about the user-reducer and in this section overall, but we're going to start off with a previous example that we have, an example project, which was the shopping cart, if you remember that. So basically I have just implemented a super simple user-reducer that if you have just worked with Redux and stuff like that, you would have seen some more complicated versions of this, what I've done in here. So basically in this shopping cart.tsx, if you see in here, I have included the codes as usual in the lecture. It's called the cart reducer, a very simple, using the switch case in here. We have some action types, blah blah blah, stuff like that. I'm sure that because this is it's supposed to be advanced course, I'm sure that you know what I'm doing in here, okay? You're familiar with the user reducer and things like that. But the point of this video is that when I was implementing this, as you can look, if you take a look at this in the beginning, this is just JavaScript, okay? It's not, the only TypeScript thing about it is that we have this kind of TSX and a little bit of some types in here. But at the beginning, this reducer, this cart reducer, if you look at it, is completely JavaScript. So when typing this in the first place, when I was trying to write it, I faced some issues. One of the issues was misspelling the action types in here. I had to go to the browser and do the console.log just to check where I did misspell anything, okay? So that was very kind of annoying process to do. Plus, if you scroll down in here, you will see that I have made a mistake. If you get over to the browser, okay, if you try to, now it maybe works. Let me just get back. Where was that? We have some dispatches, as you can see, instead of the use state, because I just changed that example. I made it using the user reducer. So now I was making a mistake like this, instead of typing the type, I just added an S in here. It says types. If you get back to the browser, you see that nothing works, it's just freezing, not updating that much and things like that. So if you are not using TypeScript, can be a very tricky part to locate the source of this bug. And it's very simple, this extra S in here. If we were using TypeScript, it would yell at us and it says, hey, what is types? I don't know what types is. And you say, okay, that was a typo. So this is one kind of issue. And the other issue, as I mentioned, was with these action names. Plus, there's one more thing. If you come down in here, I have a very simple user reducer, the dispatch thing in here, and the structuring that we did in here to get the values. I have these items, okay? It's supposed to be the items of the cart. It's if you hover over it, it is going to be a number. Well, that's correct. But if you hover over these input items, interesting. As you can see, it is any. But the type of it, as we have told the TypeScript somehow in here, that the input items is supposed to be string and number. But why is that exactly? Why does it show it in here any? If you go inside the cart reducer inside of it in here, the value of the input items is being accessed, is being updated using this action. And if you hover over this action, it is any. So TypeScript, is not that much smart in here, and it decides that, well, the input items is also any. So that is another problem that in this video we're going to see how we can tackle these issues using the TypeScript. So just as a review, you see in here that we have an initial state. In fact, like this initial state, we tell it that items and input items, and plus we have this is actually the type of the initial state and the actual initial state, which is 0, 0 for both items and the input items in here. As you can guess, one of the main issues that we have mentioned is that the TypeScript figured out that the input items is any, and we said that it's due to the action because the input items is being as a payload from the action. Here, if you take a look, it doesn't need super smart brain to figure it out because here the action is any, and this is where we are actually beaten from. So if action is not any, then what is it supposed to be? If you have worked with Redux already, you know that it says that every action, action is an object that at least has a type, something like this. You can say const action is an object, and the type can be, let's say, for example, increase or whatever else, and that's it. But if you give it anything other than, for example, increase or stuff like that, it's not gonna yell at you. Redux doesn't care about the actual signature or the type of it, as you see in here. In simple words, here we have a string, but Redux and the use reducer, in fact, will allow you to dispatch a number, surprisingly. So just for illustration purposes, let me just, instead of this any, okay, I'm going to give it a type in here. I say, so the action is going to have a type, which is going to be a string, let's say, and a payload, which is going to be, let's say, number. This is just a dummy code in here. If you go down in here, now let's see what the input items is. If you hover over it, okay, now it's a string and number. Very well. So we gotta deal with the type of this action. Okay, we need to create a proper signature. This is just a dummy thing in here. We need to create a proper signature for this action based on the reducer that is going to be dispatched for. Oh, you see lots of yelling from TypeScript. Let's just give it to any in here for a second. Dipping into this action signature, first of all, let's look at our simple reducer. It has the increase, the decrease, the reset, the update input items, and the update items from input. We have these action types, okay? All of them, but this one, do not need any payload, okay? So if it is increase, decrease, reset, or this one, okay, they are just action types, but this requires a payload. So instead of typing these every time, how about we create a type based on that, first of all, for the type of the action. Let's see if we face any challenges for that. So the very, very basic thing that may come to your mind is creating a type in here, and let's call it the action. And inside of it, we can tell it that the type value can be first increment or the increase, or it can be this decrease, or perhaps it can be the reset. And also we have this update. Okay, a little bit boring here, but anyway, copy pasting, not bad. And like this. Did you notice a problem? Yes, this one requires the payload. It needs a payload, so we're gonna eliminate it for now and see what can we do about it in a second. And for the other action type, which requires a payload, let me just grab it from here, and I'm going to create a second action type specifically for that, saying type, and let's call it action with payload, and the type can be this. Of course, beside that, we also have a payload, and the payload, because the shopping cart thing, is going to be a number. All right, nothing too fancy and too complicated here. We just created an action for those action types without payload, as you can see in here, and we created another type for the actions with payload, which is only a single action type in here, and we specified the signature for the payload of it. So let's see how can we use these instead of this any in here. So we will have a nice and beautiful signature or type for our action. It can be as simple as saying that action can be either of type action or action with payload. So maybe someone said, hey, why is this useful exactly? Let me show you something. Let's say that in this, let's just get rid of this for now. Comment it out in here. I know lots of yelling in here. Just for demonstration purposes to see how TypeScript can save our lives. Let's imagine that we want to write our reducer using if statements, right? Let's say if, and I'm going to say action.type equals. As soon as you type these quotations, oh, see, we have it in here in all the types possible that can be accepted for the action type in a drop-down list. You don't need to type them. This is a very long name, and in big code bases, definitely they can cause, the least thing they can cause is a typo and misspelling. And guess what? Let me just choose this. And some dummy stuff in here. If you want to write another if for another action type, you say action.type equals, check this. If you type the quotations, and now, okay, I see. Okay, because we did not specify anything in here, I believe. Let me just get rid of this for now. Okay, let me see. Let me give it a body so it accepts it as something from us. I'm going to say constant to be in here, and of course it's going to return something for us. I'm going to grab this and put it in here, and like that. If you say it like this, yes, now the decrease, as you can see, is not in the list. And the more you type or you write the cases for your action type, it will shorten the list for you, and that can be really helpful. You know what? In big code bases, that's how TypeScript can save your life, and trust me, it's a great save that you can get. So let me just uncomment everything, and yes, now our action is of type action and action with payload. And if you hover over items, yes, it's number. If you hover over the input items, it's either a string or a number as expected. And as a more checking to see how exactly TypeScript can help us in here in the user reducer stuff, if you try to, for example, do a dispatch, okay? For the dispatch, you are going to give it a type, the type of the action. Let's say, okay, for example, I want to use this, okay, in here. Okay, it's fine, no problem. But if you try to give it a payload in here, you say, hey, the payload, come on, payload is going to be 3. It's going to yell at you. Okay, TypeScript says, hey, you know what? This type does not have any payload, okay, based on the action and the action with payload that you provided earlier. That's nice. And guess what? If you try to use the other or the only action type that requires payload in here, it's also going to yell at you and says, hey, you know what? This action type requires a payload and you need to assign it to it. Nice, right? Okay, well, and if you wonder about the math behind the scenes, it's very simple. Whenever, let me just Control Z, whenever you give it an action type, it's going to go to the action and action with payload, the signatures you provided. For this one, it checks which action type you provided. If it's in this case, then it checks, oh, there is no payload, and it's gonna yell at you if you give it a payload. And if it's inside of here, it will expect a payload with a number type. If you don't provide that, or you provided a different payload with a string, for example, it's again going to do the math and start yelling at you if you do anything wrong. And as you can see, we're still having a yelling, something red from TypeScript. If we click on that, let's see, let's hover over that on the dispatch. This is the unchange, if you remember, on the input. Whenever you type something in here, as you can see, okay, now we have an error. If you type something, it's going to dispatch with this update input items, the value of the input, but we have an error. Okay, this is the action type that requires a payload, and we are giving it a payload, but can you guess what is the problem? Hover over it. Yes, it says type string is not assignable to type number. It's expecting a number payload. As you can recall from here, for this action type, it requires a payload, and that must be a number. So let's get back in here, and you can simply say value as number, and that will be fixing the problem. You can simply verify that by going to the browser and let's type something. 1, 2, 3, update the cart. Yes, increase, decrease, resets. Everything's fine and working. So as a recap, the whole code base, which is the shopping cart, is something from the past. We have worked on that already in another lecture, but we have created a very simple cart reducer, which I believe you are familiar with. If you have any questions regarding this, please don't hesitate to reach me in the QA section. But it's very, very simple, using a switch case for different action types. And we had a problem with the action because its signature was any. And then we learned how to define a type for the action for those action types without payloads and with a payload. And after that, we learned how it can save our lives on a large code base by checking the types for us and give us any errors related to mistakes we make. Hello everybody, welcome back. So in this video we have another context, another topic to talk about when it comes to dealing with reducers and dispatching actions with TypeScript. Specifically, we are going to see how can we pass a dispatch function as a prop. For this purpose, we are going to start working on a new demo project, which is based for picking colors. Let's see how it looks like. Do not be afraid. It's a very simple application, nothing too fancy in here. It has a color selector. You can just choose a color. So basically, we have two actions are being dispatched whenever a color changes. Okay, the hex code of that color needs to be fired as a dispatch action, and also the RGB colors, numbers actually, in fact, in here. So mainly we're going to start with two action types, plus the state that we have is this simple, lovely form that we have in here. Whenever you create a color, you can save it. So that's the state we're going to deal with. Getting back to our application, in the components, we have several small components. I'm not going to go through them because I just want to save you time instead of building everything from scratch, because it's very simple. Here we have this common, as you can see, the common components, a button, color changer. The thing that I did in here, I'm not going to spend so much time, is that I have included some simple comments in here in case you face any troubles. Also, you have the QA section. You can reach to me if any questions, any issues you find of when you explore these files in here. Okay, so I'm sure they're too smart, you are advanced, and you can understand these simple, fairly components. So let's start. The thing is that let's imagine that for this set colors in here, which you can see it in this folder, okay, we want to pass the dispatch. We want to pass a prop. Let's call it dispatch, something like this. Okay, this is the whole idea we're going to start working on. But right now we are using the user state in here. So as you can see, we need to start creating the actions first, and then we're going to create the reducer for that. Let me create in these components, or in the src, we can create a folder and we're going to call it reducer, or any other name, any other directory you like. And inside of it, we're going to create a file. Let's call it, what do we call it? Let's say color reducer, not bad. So color reducer.ts. So first we're going to start with two simple actions, one for changing the hex color and the other one for the RGB values. So let's export that. We're going to say export. Hey, what is that? Export. It's going to be a type. Let's call it change the or let's just keep it update, update hex action. And the types are going to have, first of all, the type of this action is going to be let's say update hex. Okay, and of course we're going to have a payload, which is going to be an object, is going to have a key called hex color, and it is going to be a string. Very well. And then we're going to have another action type for the RGB, and we're going to call it the update RGB action, like that. And the type is going to be, let's say, update RGB. Super simple. I'm not going to worry about the mistyping in here because it's not going to bite me later on. And for the payload, I'm going to say I have an object of array, and actually an object that says the RGB is going to be an array of number, and number. Oh, what's that? Well, this is simply an array of 3 numbers. Okay, you can maybe you have seen it in tuples and other stuff like that. So this is basically not array of number, it's an array of 3 numbers. And if you wonder why I am giving it this array of 3 numbers, it's because the library that we are using in our files for managing the color values is requiring us to give it a value of an array of 3 numbers. That's it. Okay, so now we have our actions in place. Let's go for the state. For the state, it's very simple. It's just going to have a hex color, which in case is string. You know, whenever you update the color, the state of that color is simply the hex value of that color. So let's just keep it for now simple as saying type color state is going to be hex color is just going to be an object which contains a key called hex color, and that is going to have a value of string. And now let's go for the initial state. Okay, so we're going to export it. We're going to say const initial, let's say init state is going to be, well, let's give it the type in here. So the initial state, can you guess the type of it? Yeah, it's going to be the color state. So I'm going to say color state, and it's going to be first of all an object containing what? A hex color. So this is the benefit of writing the type right away. So whenever you write it inside of here, you simply, it yells at you, it says, hey, I am expecting the hex color property. I say, okay, sir, I'm going to do that. And if you give it a number like 34, it's going to yell at you. It says, hey, I am string. I'm actually string, not number. So let's see what color to give it. If you have a favorite, go ahead and do it, unless I'm going to use this lovely hex color in here. Very well. Next, we have our actual reducer. For that, we're going to simply say const, we have that's called the color reducer, and it's going to receive, first of all, a state, and the state is going to be of type color state. Very well. And we're going to give it an initial state, which is the init state. And of course, we have the action, which can be, the action is going to be of 2 possible types. It can be either update hex action, or the other one, which is update RGB action. Very well. So let me just say it here like that. Because we have really 2 only action types, I'm going to use if statement instead of the switch statements. I'm going to say action, the action, the type equals, because of the lovely TypeScript, if you type this, okay, we have these 2 suggestions. We don't need to type them. So I say if it's hex, then I want to do first destructuring, because we have the payload in here, the hex code from the payload. I can simply say hex color, hex color from the action.payload. And basically we're going to return everything in the state plus that hex color. And for the other action type, I'm just going to copy paste this in here, and I'm going to say it's yelling at me TypeScript. Very well, nice. It's because it needs to be RGB. We have done the hex, and also it says we don't have hex color in the payload. Here we have RGB, so okay, fine. I'm going to grab the RGB in here. But we need to return the hex color, okay? And in fact, we need to figure out a way to convert the RGB to hex code. For that, we're going to use a library. It's very simple. So let's get on the top in here, like that. You simply need to type RGB, okay, from color convert. If you do that, it will be imported automatically. And down in here, so I can do the conversion in here, like saying because we have the RGB name same as the other one on the top imported, let me just do it in a different way. Instead of this, I'm going to have, we have the const hex color equals the RGB that we imported from the library dot hex. This is going to convert it for us, and for the feed we are going to say action dot payload dot RGB, and simply we can just destructure it like this in here. Okay, so simply we have two action types. One is going to receive the hex and return it, and the other one is going to receive the RGB code of that color, convert it to hex, and then return it using this action type. And as the default state, we had all the action type states, the cases are being checked, but just to make sure, we can finally say in here return, and we're going to say state, like the default case in switch case. And before we start using this color reducer, of course, we need to export it from this file. All right, let's use it in the app.tsx in here. So instead of this line of state, we are going to use the use reducer. So let's say const use reducer. What's going on here? I'm just imported from here. I'm going to say use reducer. Okay, nice. Sometimes things go wrong, whatever. And we are going to give, first of all, the reducer itself. Do you remember the name? It was color reducer. So let's just import it in here. Yes, import. And it needs an initial state. I think we have named it init state. Okay, cool. Of course, we get some yelling from TypeScript in here because we changed everything. The state is now a reducer. We're going to take care of all of them. So if you remember, the color reducer returns one thing all the time, a hex color. So let's bring that in here. I'm going to destructure it in here. I'm going to say hex color, and of course the dispatch. So let's call it dispatch like this. So let's see what we have in here. We have this set. We're going to change it from here. We are going to say, instead of this, we say dispatch, and of course we're going to give it the action type. So we're going to say the type is going to be, oops, see, here we have it. We are going to update the hex value, and of course we need to give it the payload. So for the payload, we need to give it the key, which is hex color, and we're going to say e dot target dot, let's say, value. And the error is just because we need to give it a payload keyword in here. Yeah. Okay. So this has been a long video. I'm not gonna continue it. Let's just stop it in here. And in the next video, we're gonna continue the purpose of this lecture, in fact. But before that, let's verify that our new unchange, which uses the use reducer, is working as expected. Let's refresh and click on that. New color. Yeah, everything's working. Hello everybody, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to actually pass down this dispatch to this set color. And why we do that, if you get back to the browser, as you can see now, you cannot change these values, the RGB stuff in here, okay? And that's because we don't have any action or dispatch function for them in place. That's the agenda we're going to do. So we're going to do the passing on this set colors component. Let me just open for you in case you want to do it yourself. And as you can see in here, we have some hex to RGB, for example, or the other components. So we're going to pass it first of all to this part from here. And then we're going to, if you open one of these components in here, we're going to be consuming some of them. So basically, let me just close that for now and get back to the app.tsx. And we're going to do something like this. You say dispatch. We're going to send a prop called dispatch, and it's actually going to have the dispatch value, something like this. And if you wonder why we are drilling down this prop, sending it to the set colors and then from the set colors to another prop, well, that's a kind of preparing the scene for using the context API. Okay, so let's just do it this way, and we're going to refactor it later on. So let's go to the set colors and tell it that we are going to have another, actually, instead of just this hex color, we're going to expect another prop, which is called dispatch, and its signature is going to be dispatch from React. And of course, it's going to ask us for what action. And the action that I need is actually in the color reducer. If you remember, we had two possible signatures for that, the update text action and the update RGB action. But I don't want to repeat myself every time I write this statement in here. So let's just create it for once forever. I'm going to say type, and let's call it, let's say color actions, okay? And they are going to be exactly equal to this value in here. So instead of just repeating this statement, I'm going to say color actions. And of course, we're going to export it so that we can use it in other files like this in here. Paste it, import it, and we're good to go. So great that we have this in place. We can go to this hex to RGB once again in here to complete the type signatures. Let's just copy paste something from here. Let's say I want this dispatch again for the to RGB file also to be received as a prop. We need to import everything first from React. Dispatch, where are you? Oh, come on. Dispatch from React. Let me see. Get on the top and say import. No, import dispatch from React. Okay, so we have this patch. Oh, we missed this edge in here anyway. And for the action also we have the color actions, and we just import that too. So we need to receive this dispatch as a prop, so definitely we need to mention it in this place. Also in this set colors, we need to mention this dispatch, define it in here, and then we are going to pass it, because you see that TypeScript is yelling at us, says, hey, this is expecting a dispatch prop, so I'm going to give it to that. So I say dispatch is going to be the dispatch that we're receiving from the app.tsx, and we can also now use it here. So now that we have everything in place for this file, let's just create a helper function. So whenever they change these input values, they're going to dispatch a payload for updating the RGB color. So let's say that I'm going to call this function, let's say update RGB, and it's going to receive three values. The red stands for R, which is, as you can see in here, the RGB. They are all number, come from that library. And the green is going to be G, and the blue is going to be B, of course. And we're going to say that, yeah, that's mostly all the job in here. So what we have is that we want to dispatch. We are going to use this dispatch finally in here. And I'm just going to say that for the dispatch, I need to give it a type. And if you do this, oh, you see that we have these autocomplete, or these suggestions to be more specific. If you don't get these kind of suggestions from TypeScript, this is a signature or a sign actually of there is something going wrong with your TypeScript wiring or defining types of that. This is why actually we are using TypeScript, so that it helps us with this kind of features among our code base. So we are going to do the update RGB because we're updating the RGB value in here, and of course we are going to have a payload. And as you remember, for this action type, the payload was going to be an object with a key called RGB and a array of 3 numbers. Do you remember that? So it's going to be red, green, and a blue value. Blue, like this. Cool. So before we test everything out, we need to add the onChange listeners for each of our inputs. So we're going to say onChange, and for that we are going to say let's see, E, and we're going to call our helper function update RGB. Yes, and inside of it we're going to give it the red or the green or the blue. Now we are updating the red one, so we're going to say that the actually red is going to be e.target.value as number. Okay, and because we're not going to change the G and the B, we're just going to say green going to be G and blue is going to be B, something like that. So let me check that. Oh, sorry, this is going to be not equals, but the two dots like that. All right. So let's do the copy paste business in here. I'm going to do it for the green, but this time this is going to be the R, which is red, but we are modifying the green. And also we are going to do the same on change, this time for the blue. Okay, so we're gonna say, hey, you are going to move from here. You're gonna see G, and the B for the blue is going to be updated like this. So before we run the code, okay, and test it on the browser, I believe there is a mistake. We need to fix it in here, because if you get to the color reducer in here, it is giving the hex code of the color. Okay, when you give it the RGB, red, green, blue colors from the RGB, all right, it converts it to the code, but we need the hashtag. Okay, this hashtag in here is not going to be added via this rgb.hex function. We need to do it, or to add it manually. So we're gonna say hashtag plus this one. Okay, and this is pretty fine because TypeScript is not going to take care of that. It's just about strings and not strings. Anyway, so this is just an addition. You have to fix it before you go in the browser and test it. So if you get a minute in here, you can change it a little bit in here, and as you can see, the colors are now being changed and updated. Voila! Congratulations! So now you have passed successfully a dispatch as a prop down to some components and use them in there, and you declare the signatures. Hello everybody and welcome back. Do you remember from the previous lecture we had this kind of issue in here that we said we need to add a hashtag and stuff like that? So basically you may wonder, can we use like the template literals as type for variables and stuff in TypeScript? Well, yes, you can do that. So let's see, in this video we're going to talk about this specifically. Imagine that, or first of all, let's see what is exactly a template literal. It's like using these two characters, and inside of them you can say like blah blah, you know, just a string, and after that you can have between code braces after a $sign, you can put like a variable or whatever else in here. Okay, so things like that. So this is simply what a template literal is about. I'm sure you are aware about it. Actually, it's a very basic feature in JavaScript, and it was recently introduced into TypeScript 2, I believe, TypeScript 4 and 3 or 2, I believe. So let's just get on the top of this file in here, and let's say that you have a type. Let's call it hex color. Okay, and now you can tell TypeScript that this type is going to be a string that starts with, for example, a hashtag followed by a string. Nice, right? So this is completely a signature. This is a type which says only strings are allowed that start with a hashtag. Okay, you see, this is very nice actually and very powerful. You can use it as a type in TypeScript. So what other patterns do we have? Something like this. You can use it like, let's say, RGB string. You want a template for this, you can simply say that this is going to be starting with RGB, and between parentheses, it's going to be a number. Huh, nice, right? And also another number for the G, and for the blue also, we can have another number. Cool, right? So this is another pattern you can achieve using template literals as a type in TypeScript. Of course, for the RGB, usually the numbers start from 0 to 255, I believe. You cannot do any kind of ranging numbers and stuff, but it's still very powerful to limit the strings that are accepted. For example, the RGB string type, they got to follow this pattern. So to show some more perhaps useful case of this feature that you can do, perhaps if you have a type, let's say we have the color formats, they can be, let's say they can be RGB, for example, and let's go with only hex. Okay, so as you can see in here, for these action types in this type in here, it is update hex, also update RGB. So the hex and the RGB is being changed. We can make use of this template literal feature of TypeScript and do something like this. I can say type, for example, the valid action types that we can have are in the template literal. We say they start with update dash. Inside of this, you simply give it a color formats. So if you save it, if you hover over these action types, oh, you see? So the type that we have for action types is either update hex or update RGB. Nice. Yeah, it's a very powerful feature, and instead of hard coding all the text in here like this, you can simply go ahead and use these action types instead for the type key. So as you can see, it can make your codes a lot more clean and more readable. One more use of this hex color, for example, you can say if you have a function like, let's say, a constant is hex color, and you are receiving a str as string, and you are going to say return s dot or str starts with hashtag. Okay, so if you hover over this is hex color, it is a boolean. Okay, it returns it is true or false. Okay, but if you want to make it more informative, all right, you can simply come in here and tell that this is going to return that str is hex color. Now you hover over this is hex color. Oh, this is nice, right? Very much more informative than the boolean thing in here. So it says yes, str is of this template literal theme that you have in here. Nice. And if you wonder where you can use such functionality, actually, when you're fetching data, a bunch of data from an API, and you are not sure what type are they, you can do such checks on them and cast them to the proper type, based on the check that you do. Yeah, very much powerful. I just wanted to showcase this template literal feature of TypeScript and how you can use it to make your codes cleaner and more efficient. Hello everybody and welcome back. I have a practice for you at the beginning of this video. I want you to figure out a way, whenever you click on any of these colors, okay, I want them to update the color in here, all right? And of course I will do the other way in this set colors, the other inputs in here, where they are not working. You can even go and mess with them if you like. You can choose which path you want to do the practice. But so in case you want to add a listener for these inputs or these ones, so when you click on a color, they update this color in here. Okay, you can pause the video and get back, see how we do it together. Okay, because in the previous videos we talked about how to pass the dispatch to, for example, the two RGB component, if you remember, and we can update the color using them. So basically these are going to be somehow similar to them. I will put that mission on you so you can do it yourself. But for this lesson, we are going to go with clicking on each of these colors, even these colors. So when you click on them, they are going to update the color. Very well. Okay, let's get back to the code. So in the app.tsx, as you can see, we have passed this dispatched in this set colors. We can also send it to the saved colors. Okay, so I'm going to work first on these two colors in here. Later on, you can do exactly the same for these other two areas of colors. So let's just pass the dispatch here first. Okay, so it starts telling us, it says that saved colors component is not expected to receive any props named dispatch. Let's go to the saved color and see what's going on there. And by the way, I want to mention something. If you see lots of these styles, inline styles in here, I know that's not what you're going to have in a real project, but I just want to keep things simple. Please do not, or at least forgive me about this. This is just for demonstration purposes. Okay, so I just want to mention it in here. All right, let's get back to the dispatch signature. So let's add the dispatch in the where were I? Let me just check it once again. The saved colors, I just missed it for a second. Yep, in here. As you can see, we yet do not have the dispatch, so let's add it. We're gonna say dispatch is going to be dispatch from React. Oh, come on. Let me just import it myself. Always have to do it manually sometimes. So dispatch, and for that we're gonna say no, the color actions that we import from the reducer already. Okay, let's come down in here, and we are going to define it in this component. We're going to say dispatch so we can use it. So for the saved color, okay, I believe that we need to pass it in here, so I'm going to say dispatch. Dispatch is going to be the dispatch in here. So yes, we need to go to the saved color component again in here as the subcomponent, and we are going to define it once again in the props. So we can do it in the onClick, but later on, let me do it for now the simple way. I'm going to grab this from here to save us a little bit of time. Okay, this is going to be from React, not importing. I don't know what's wrong with that. Anyway, so let's just import this from React here, like this. And also we define it in here, dispatch. So where is the color? The color, I believe, is in this one. And in here, believe it or not, we can also once again pass it down, but let's just do it as the onClick in here. So I'm going to say, instead of that, dispatch, and of course we're going to give it a type value. So let's say type is going to be, let's see if we have any suggestions. Yes, so we are going to update the hex, and we're going to have the payload, which is going to be the hex color. So as you can see, the hex color is also being passed as a prop by the codes that I provided you for this demo project. So we simply need to mention it in here. So very basic, this component is receiving several props, including this hex color. When you click on it, it's going to dispatch to our reducer an action type with the update hex with the payload of the hex color that it is being receiving from its props. So let's verify that. Go back to the browser, and because we did it for this one, if I click on this, the color of this should change. Let's click. Yeah, sounds like it's changing. Click on that. Yo, very well. So we can do exactly the same for all of these. Just you need to pass the dispatch as a prop. So this is the basic idea. You can do it yourself as a small, lovely practice. Hello everybody, welcome back. So as you can see in here, we have used the reducer to send the dispatch as a prop, so that when you click, for example, on this, it's going to dispatch some hex code. But the better way of doing this is, how about we provide these components with the dispatch itself, so they do the dispatch in there, and we do not need to do that props drilling, passing the dispatch prop, 2-3 times to several components, and there can be some kind of mess. Okay, so in this video, we are going to focus on the context API, and we're going to see if we face any issues, any challenges, and of course, we're going to see how to overcome them. Getting back, I'm going to create a new folder in the SRC, same as the reducer. Let's just create a directory called the context. And inside of it, we're going to say context.tsx. So I do not need to mention, this is a very basic context. I'm very sure that you know about the context API. It's kind of a tree, you can wrap the application or the components you wish to, send them some props and values, and they're going to have access to those values and props using the use context hook from the React. Okay, so that's the first thing we want to do, is to create, let's say, the color context is going to be create context from the, create context. Let's import it from React. I know what's going on with my VS Code, but let's do it manually, not complaining more than that. From React. Okay, I think it needs a res or something. So create context, and inside the create context, oh, what do we have? A default value. Default value. We have seen that default value needed for the user state and also for the user deducer. Well, very simple. We can just simply give it an object with a hex color, let's say, and give it just a simple value of, I don't know, FDGE, whatever. Is this a color? Actually, I don't know. Just keep it like this. So if you hover over this color context, so the type of this color context is an object, or actually a React context with the hex color as a string. Okay, fair enough. So life sounds very nice. We're gonna see if we face any issues. Let's just export it for now, and we're going to create the color provider. So again, we're gonna say export constant, let's say color provider, and for now we're not gonna give it the children. Let's just say it returns a, let's say, color context, which is created up in there, dot provider, and inside of it we're gonna wrap the children. Okay, and of course for the children we need to enter that as a props. We're gonna say children, correct? Okay, and of course we're gonna give it the props with children. Oh, I have to do it manually once again here. Okay, it's working. And we simply need to give it a value for this provider, and let's say, okay, I'm gonna give you an object with hex color, and let's give it a value of hashtag DAB, I don't know, A55. So let's see, beside this hex color, okay, the value of hex color, we need to give it the dispatch, right? We want to make our components to access the hex color and the dispatch, but there's one issue arises in here. You only can use the use reducer inside a React component, which means in here, right? And if you want to actually say like this, dispatch blah blah blah, you cannot do that. Why? Because you only have to do the export of this color context outside this color provider. Kind of paradox, correct? So how can I access this dispatch in here? This is the issue that we want to focus actually as part of this video. For fixing things, first of all, we need to give this create context a type in here. So first of all, we are going to say, hey, we are going to receive a hex color, which is going to be string, and also a dispatch, and the dispatch type is going to be let's say dispatch from React. What's going on here today? Let's just import it. Okay, so we have this dispatch, and the dispatch is going to have the color actions, if you remember. Let's just make things correct. But now you may say, all right, let's go and give it the dispatch here, but oops, we cannot do that because we only can access the dispatch from inside this component inside of here. So what's the trick? The very simple thing that we can have in here is that maybe you say, let's make this optional. The error is gone. This is correct way, but not a great one. So if you just hover over this one in here, this color context, you see that dispatch can be undefined. So you're gonna say, well, I promise to define it every time, blah blah blah, but there is an edge case. It can happen. Okay, you can give it an undefined dispatch, and that can cause problems for your application. So what is the other, also correct but less, or perhaps better approach? Not completely great, but a better one is to do something like this. For that, let's just grab this. It's getting very much growing in here. I'm going to say I have a type. Let's name it color context state. Go like this, and I'm just going to grab it from here and put it in here. So the solution is that in here it says, hey, this is not same as the color context state type. I'm going to say, you know what? just pretend that what I am giving you in here, for example, this hex color for a minute, that it is following or based on the color context state. Well, you may say, this is somehow like the previous one, but if you go to this, for example, I think in the index.tsx, do you see this? Well, the same guys behind React are somehow doing it in here. It's like telling React, you know what, chill. There's something you don't know, but I know. Like, I am going to have this dispatch just 5 or 6 lines after this line in here. So definitely this is somehow, maybe you are good at, or this is just the simplest thing and perhaps the more valid simple approach for fixing this issue that I'm going to use in this module in here. But if you see in here, we check the value yelling at you TypeScript that says, hey, you know what, there is a property dispatch and it's missing, you need to give it to me. So that's fine, that's cool, a little bit safe, not bad. So let's create the dispatch and pass it to the value in here. Okay, so let's get back to the app.tsx, and I am going to steal some stuff. I'm going to take this from here, cut it, and just paste it inside my provider, and we got to do a couple of imports in here. We want the color reducer. Also, we want the initial state. And one more step is that we need to pass the dispatch in here. Great. So our context API is somehow complete for now. But for that, let me just not forgetting this one because we're not hard coding anything in here. Let's just read it from the state. All right, let's make use of this color provider inside this app component. So I'm going to say constant. I am going to destructure the hex color, and also it has a dispatch from the use context. And for that, I'm going to get the color context that I just created in that context file. Color. Yes, I have exported it correctly. Okay, so now we have the hex color and we have the dispatch, which is being dispatched in here. Before we verify everything, we need to get back to the index in here and wrap our application with the color provider that we just created in here. Get this from there, and here we go. Let's verify and see if it's working. Yeah, it's working. Okay, but we can now easily implement the same functionality for the rest of these buttons in here using the context API. So let me close this one. So let's go to one of the files in here in the components. I believe in the color. Where is that? Let's go here in the color swatch. Okay, so is it in here? So in the saved color in here, we have this file in here. So in the let me see, we have this color. Okay, I just got it in here. Let me go to definitions, and here we go. Yeah, so we have the end click. I can just get rid of this in here. So in the common folder, we have this color change. So let's get on the top of these components, and we're going to say use context, come on. Okay, let's import it manually from the React. Import, no. Import this from React. Okay, so down in here, I'm going to say use context, and I am going to give it the color context like this. So what I really care about in here is only the dispatch that comes from the use context. So I'm going to say dispatch, and let me just remove this on click because we don't need it. Simply, we're going to say dispatch, and we're going to say the type is going to be, oh yeah, we have the suggestion once again, update the hex. And also for the payload, we are going to say we have the hex color, which is coming as a prop to this component. So now we can verify everything, get back to the browser, and yeah, everything is completely working. All right, welcome back everybody. So before we deep dive into the generics, let's talk about some of the TypeScript utility helpers. Okay, it's just about giving you a hint, and a mentality that such tools do exist. So whenever you need them, you go look for them. We're gonna start with the keyword key of. Let's assume that we have an object like this, and it contains two keys, key 1 and key 2, dummy data in here. I can do something like this. I say type, let's say, for example, just give it a name. It can say res or result or whatever. And I can say that this result type is going to be key of. As you can see, it is suggested by TypeScript. So I say key of object type. That's simple. Now, what does this key of mean? It simply means that the type of this result type means the value can be only key 1 or key 2, that's it. So what exactly that means? Let's hover over it. Yeah, as you can see, it says in here, not very descriptive. Let me see. If you just give it something like, let's say, and string, so I want it to be one of the keys of this object, plus it needs to be string. Now, if you hover over it, you will see that it's key 1 and key 2. Of course, if you remove this string, it can be anything, but it must be the key 1 and key 2. So if you type like this, let's say const, test constant, let's say, and if you want to give it a value before that, of course, you need to say that this is going to be of the type result. Then if you open the quotations, it's going to give you the suggestion. It says the only values you can have for test is key 1 and key 2. Which of that? So this is the whole idea of the key of. Let's go to the next one. Let's imagine that we have such an object in here. If we want to define a type based on the values of this object, it's very simple. We can say, for example, a type, let's call it test 0. Okay, and it's going to be, let's say, the name of the object, which is obj, and between curly braces, you need to give it the key of which value you want to grab the type of it. So if I say, for example, p1, now if you hover over this test 0, it says that this type only accepts d. Why? Because d is the value of p1, of this prop 1, you can call it, which I mentioned it in here as the only type accepted for this. So if you want, for example, your type to only accept IM0, you need to mention this 0 in here. So simply saying type, actually this is not 0, this needs to be, let's say, 1. Yeah, now it makes better. So type test 0, and I'm going to say from the name of the object that we have, obj, or any other name that you have, and you need to mention the key, which you need the value of it, which is 0 in here. I say 0. Now, if you hover over test 0, you see that this type only accepts IM0. If you, for example, say in here const test 0 const whatever, it's just a simple name, I don't want to name it, and you say that its type is going to be test 0, then the only value you can give, if you give it, for example, 25, it's gonna yell at you. It says, hey, it only accepts IM0. So if you give it now IM0 as suggested, the error is gone. So this is how you can grab the value of a single key from an object and use it as a signature or a type, simply by mentioning the name of the object and followed by the key between curly braces. So I'm just showing random stuff in here, so to give you the idea, which is the point of this video. Imagine that we have this object in here, and I want to define a type that only allows the values, each value of these ones, not just a single one, all of them. How to do that? Well, you say type res, or whatever name you give it in here, and you say that this type is going to only accept each value from this object. How to do that? You simply use the make of key of object. Now, what does that mean? if you hover over result in here res, you see that the res type only accepts the number A or B. Okay, this is just in case somewhere somehow you need to grab some kind of type like this in your React applications. This is how you can make use of this. It's just a kind of combination. Okay, next one is about the unions. Let's imagine that we have two types like set1 or set2. It's just a name, I don't know. It's not a real set from the data structures. So the set1 has A or B or C, and the set2 is B or C or D. As you can see in here that B is repeated and C is also repeated. For making a union type between these two types, it's very simple. You can say type, let's call it union type or whatever name you want to give it, and it's going to be set1 union with set2. Now if you hover over union type, okay, A, B, C, and D. That's how you set a union between two types. Next feature is the intersection. Intersection is actually combining props, you can think of it, or types together. It only takes into account the common types or the shared types among two sets in here. Let me just do it in action and see it for yourself. So I say intersections or whatever name you give it, something like that, and it's going to be set1 and set2. And if you go to that, yes, you see only B and C because B and C are only both shared among the two types. And this is useful when you want to combine the props that you want to send to a single component. Okay, you simply just do it like this, and it's going to get rid of the not common actually props that you have maybe. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about is the conditional types. Imagine that you want to create some kind of types that help you check if a component can accept a kind of prop. You know, for example, you have perhaps a button that can only accept size and color as props, and anything else passed to it should be excluded. I mean, that kind of check that perhaps you want to have in your React application, which can result into a more type-safe application. So I'm going to paste a code. Don't get confused. I'm going to explain it for you in here. So imagine that we have a type that is called can accept prop. This is only the T and this is the K. Okay, don't get confused. Just change the name to help you understand it more. So for this can accept prop, it simply uses the extends and key of. Okay, utility tools of TypeScript says if the prop is one of the keys of this object. Okay, for example, if the component props is this button props and you give it this color in here, it checks and says, well, the color is key of component props, which is button props, and so prop extends that, and it's going to return true in this case, or this one is going to return false because icon does not exist. You know, we don't have such a key called icon. All right, so this is going to return true or false types based on the condition that you pass to it. For example, we have can button accept color? Yes, they can, because the button props that you are passing, okay, contains the color. So the prop extends key of components in this case, and it's going to return true. But can button accept icon? For example, you create this kind of type, so you're going to use this can accept prop. You feed it with the button props, okay, and say icon. It goes to check. It says, does the prop that we have, which is icon, extends the list of keys from this component, which is this one? We say we have size, we have color, no icon, nope, again return false. So the other final types that we can have, the result 1, result 2, you say that this is true and this is false. This is, as I said, one of the use cases just to help you how to make use of conditional types in case you want to only accept set of props for your component. That's how you do it. Okay, the next one is fairly easy. So far, we have created types that define a type for the values inside such an object that has key and value. How about defining a type for the key itself? Well, that's very simple. You can simply say, let's say another type, object with string keys is going to be, this is equals, okay. So for the keys, we are going to say the keys are string, and the value can be number, for example, or a string also. You can also iterate over a union. Let's say we have this object like this, and instead of saying, for example, A equals to B number and B also being a number, and for example, let's say C is also a number, instead of that, for doing this simply, we can eliminate this from here, and by saying that we have K in, it's either A, either B, or either C. Now, if you hover over this object, you will see that A number, B number, C number. Just simpler and clearer. You can even do it like this. You can make another one. Let's just call it mask, and this is going to be, come on, what is this mistake? Anyway, so you can say that K in, it's going to be in object. Okay, sorry, it can be key of object, and it's going to be a boolean like this. Now hover over mask. Oh yeah, you can see A, B, C is a boolean, so it iterates over the keys because we say in key of object. All right, so the key of object are A, B, C, and it says for all of them create some keys for me, each having a boolean value. The other one is pick. What is pick? Well, simply you can create a type using pick by saying, let's say, give it a name of new type, and it's going to say the word pick. It's built in TypeScript, as you can see, and instead of these, we can say from this object type in here, okay, if you say comma, it says, okay, K extends K of T. T is the object type that we have in here, and we need to give it which keys from this object type do you want to include in your new type object. So I'm going to say I want 1 and I want 3. So if you now go and hover over this new type, you see that it is a new object type with 1 and 3 as the key values. Okay, the last thing is the emit. So you can say type, new type 2, and you can say emit. Okay, and of course, once again, we give it this object. So I'm going to say object, and it says which one do you want to emit. This time I'm going to go with 1 also, just I have used them in the previous one. Let's exclude them here. If you hover over new type, you see that it has 2 and 4, and the 1 and 3 are emitted from it. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this lesson. They were just some of the utility tools that we have built in TypeScript, and they may help you in your journey in typing React applications. Hello everybody, welcome back. So in this session we want to talk about the generics in TypeScript, and in the upcoming couple of lectures we are trying to fix a problem, an issue that we had in the context. Okay, when we use the as keyword for working around an issue that was rising. So first of all, I decided that why not, let's talk about generics and see what kind of magic we can achieve with TypeScript generics. So for doing that, we are going to use an online editor. If you go to Google and type TypeScript Playground, you will have this beautiful site in here, TypeScript.lang.org. If you click on that, you're gonna face something like this in here. Just to save some time, I'm going to paste a very simple and basic TypeScript code in here, and we're going to walk through that and see what are we dealing with. Okay, don't be surprised, please. This is a very simple thing. I'm going to explain for you. So, first of all, we have a type in here named book, which has 3 keys: author, title, price, and each of them is going to be string, but the price is number. Then we have these action types using the template literals. I think you saw that in another video. It's something very basic, should be for you. So it says update dash. This is the constant string, and based on the key of book, so the keys of the book are author, title, price. So if you hover over these action types, you see that this is very powerful. You don't need to type this long string in here. Simply using these template literals, as you saw before, that the action type, it can be update author or update title or update price. So this is the purpose of this one. What are these actions? These actions is another type, as you can see indicated in here, which receives two values. First, we have the T, and then we have the K. What are these? The T is actually can be anything. For example, in our case, it's going to be the book. This type of book in here can be the T, and the second thing, as we see in here, is the title. What is the title? Oh, what is this thing in here? This is very simple. This simply indicates that the second value is going to be first a key of T. So what are the key of T in case the T is book? Well, it can be author, title, price, and it must be string. So this title in here is a string, and also it's equal to one of the keys of this book in here, which is the T. Okay, so this statement in here simply indicates that the second value, which is the title in here, needs to be or extends the key of T. What is T? This is the book. It has 1, 2, 3. Does it? Yes, title exists as a key of the book, and it needs to be string, which in case, yeah, it is a string. Nice. So, well, you maybe get mad at me and say, oh, this sounds too complicated, but seriously, on real large code bases, you're going to face a lot of such statements. They're going to save you a lot of time. As you hover over, for example, this in here, you see that it's completely dynamic. Okay, you don't need to repeat yourself and create lots of junk codes. As you can see in the payload in here also is just simply saying that this payload is like T and the value of key based on the key of that. This is very simple. If you get confused, you can think of it like this, now the T in this case, which is update title action. Okay, if you want to say update price action, you would give it the book, but instead of this title, you would say the, for example, price. Okay, so now we are working on the title, and the payload is going to be, when you say T and K, now it is book, so it's as simple as saying that dot if the K is title, so it's like this, or maybe like this. Title, just grabbing the value of it, so indicating what the payload should be and stuff like that. And once again, this is great for reusability. For example, if you hover over this update title action, you see that the type is dynamically set to update title. If you change it to for example, let's say price, in here, you see that price and the payload is also number. You didn't need to change anything, see? So this is very much powerful when it comes to having reusability in mind. And before we finish this lecture, if you wonder why is this saying, hey, why is it string, for example, in this case? Well, we said that the K extends or is a key. The keys in here are author, title. For example, if you give it, let's say price, is it still string? Yes, because the keys of this book, each of them, even price, are string. The value is number. And what we're talking about in here is just the value, which is one of the keys, not the value of that key, the corresponding value of it. So yeah, simply that's why it's a string in here, even if you keep the, the second one as price, for example. Hello everybody, welcome back. So before we move on to React and start using this generic thing for solving that context issue, let's put some more light on the generics and see how exactly we can really benefit from them by doing a little more examples by that. So you are all familiar with a data structure called linked list. It's like it has a member or an item inside of it, followed by an item that is linked or is mentioning the next node inside that linked list, something like that. It may sound weird for you, but it's very simple. The basic for that, let me just create a type for it like this. Let's call it linked, like linked list or something like that. And I'm going to say, hey, you are going to have a T. And also inside of it, it's going to have first a value. And the value is going to be of type T. It can be a string, number, whatever you pass to it. And also it is optional to have a next value, which is in turn is also another linked with a type also T. So this only indicates that every instance that wants to be of type linked and the T, number or string, whatever, is going to have a value with the same type that we pass to it. And also optionally, it can have or be mentioning to the next linked object like this in here. What does that mean exactly? Let's do, let's say, for example, we are going to have a text linked or, linked list or something like that. You can name it whatever you like. And it's going to be of type linked that we just created in here. And of course, the value is going to be string. All right. And for it, it's yelling at you, TypeScript. It says, hey, this is mandatory to have a value. It's missing, as you can see in the type. And the value is T, whatever the T value. And if you hover again in here, it is exactly mentioning that it needs to be string. So let's give it, for example, a value by mistake. Let's say 23. Oh, it's yelling at you again. It says, you gave me a number. It's not assignable to type string. So, it's figuring out things here. Totally, what I'm trying to emphasize in this video is that whenever you can make use of TypeScript to do the business for you, just let it do it, okay? Do not step in whenever you don't need to. When TypeScript can figure out the types for you, let it do it, okay? Don't do the business yourself by doing lots of typing here and there and creating lots of junky types. What is that meaning exactly? Well, this is just the point. A couple of minutes, you're going to see what I mean. So let me just change this to, let's say, 3, okay? And optionally, we can have a next value, which is going to be, if you hover over it, it's going to be, again, undefined, or it can be a linked with a string. So if you want to give it a value, it needs to be exactly in here. Says, hey, now that you have a next, it needs to have a value. And the value simply is going to be, if you give it a number in here, it's not going to accept it. If you hover, it's a string. That's what I mean, okay? TypeScript is doing the business. It is figuring out the types of every object or every instance that we have around in here. So let's say 4, for example. Great, cool. To demonstrate furthermore the point that I told you by letting TypeScript do the business for you, let's imagine that I want to have a function that creates actually the linked list for me by making use of these types and things that we have. So let's name it build or create a link. All right, let's assume you have this kind of function, and also it's going to receive a value, and that value is going to be string, right? And in return, it's going to give back a linked, okay? And the value is also going to be string, or the type of the value is going to be string. And inside of it, it's simply going to say, hey, you know what? Return just, let's say a value, whatever. Okay, so nice, great. This is exactly a builder that makes use of this type in here, and it creates for you, a linked list. But the point is in here, a string linked list. What if we wanted to have a building link function like this that is going to create a linked list, but for a number? Well, simple. We have to duplicate this, right? And create one for the numbers. But this is not efficient. This is what I mean. If you just a little bit make use of TypeScript, you can let it do the business for you. And instead of duplicating this logic in here, you can just keep it as it is by a single function doing multiple stuff for you for multiple types. How to do that? Just an example in here. Very, very simple. You only need to here before the function is to define a generic parameter like t in here, but it's getting confused. You just need to give it like a comma in here, and instead of hard coding a specific type, for example string, you just need to tell it, hey, t, and for the linked list also I want to have a t. So what you are basically saying that, hey, there is a generic called t, The value you are going to receive is also of that T type, and the linked list you are going to generate for me or return for me after this function is also of that type. If you give it a string in here, it's going to take a string value and build a linked list for you, which is based on that string or the number. If you want to make it, more use, just to make it more clear, very easy. We can say, for example, we need first a string. Okay, const. Okay, we need a string linked list or whatever you call it. It's by saying build link, and you just need to give it a value. For example, let's give it a string in here. I say hi, right? And we're gonna build another one saying, for example, number linked. And again, we use the same function in here saying build link, and this time I'm gonna give it a number. I say, you see, for now TypeScript says, hey, the value is unknown. If I give it a number, it says okay. Let's hover over string linked, and I can see it says okay. String linked is a linked type with a string, and this one, it's a linked of type. Very nice. You see, we didn't even mention any generics in here, and TypeScript, by following this pattern in here, we had t. As soon as you give a value to any of these t, as soon as you pass a type, a specific type for any of these t, TypeScript is going to figure out that type for all the t you have in here, including this t in this linked list. And that is superpower. You don't need to do it yourself and tell TypeScript, hey, I want to give it a string, and as a result I want this to be also a string. Just as simple as this, it is figuring things for us. So the ethical point of this lesson is that whenever you are typing a TypeScript project actually, and you see that you are writing lots of boilerplate code, and you are happy by, okay, I'm writing TypeScript stuff, well, you gotta step back there and think about, why do I need all these boilerplate codes? TypeScript is here to help me keep things simple as much as it can. So using such techniques that you can see in here, that can save you a lot of time and also remove lots of junk code from your code bases and keep it cleaner and more maintainable. Hello everybody, welcome back. So in this video, we're gonna make use of the generics to fix an issue. If you don't remember the issue, in the context that we created for our color demo project, as you remember, we had this color context, okay, and we had to give it a default value. And for our context, we said that for the color context, we needed two values, the hex color, which is a string like this, and a dispatch. The only thing that we are going to share here and there on the application using the create context, a dispatch and a hex color, which is a string. But the issue arises that in this stage in here, when we use the create context, we could not use the dispatch as a default value in here like this, saying, okay, the hex color default value is going to be this color and the dispatch is going to be blah, 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 whatever hell. Why? Because if you want to create a dispatch and use it an initial value in here, you need to use reducer. Use reducer. And use reducer is only allowed to be used inside a component like, this color provider, a kind of functional component or think of it. So when we do not have access to this dispatch in here and we cannot use it, we try to somehow, point out to TypeScript that this color context, okay, is going to be as type of color context state. And as you can see in the color context state, it is mandatory to have a dispatch. By using this as keyword, we told TypeScript that, hey, dude, you know what? I know that I have to include a dispatch in here, but trust me, I am going to initiate it. I'm going to inject it, but right now I don't have it. Just give me some time. That's what it means to say as color context, okay? But this is not safe. This is not great because by any chance, if you just forget to give it this dispatch, it can kill your project. It can cause a lot of troubles for you later on by debugging stuff like that. So long story short, we talked about generics, and we want to see how exactly we can make use of generics to solve this issue instead of using this as, how to have a more robust and correct solution. The first step is that we are going to this folder in context, and I'm going to create a new file, and let's call it build, or let's just keep it as this create in here. I'm going to say create context.ts. But it kind of, gonna have some kind of component. Let's just rename it in here, and we're gonna have tsx. Okay, now it's better. So let's say, for example, we need to export this. So we say export const, and we're gonna say create context, and it's going to be a kind of function like this. So the whole idea is that we are going to, because as you can see in here, yet we do not have access to the dispatch, so we can use the generic to tell create context that, hey, we are going to have something, but yet we are not familiar with the type of it, but we want to handle the generics somehow in this create context, that in case we do not give it that thing, in our case dispatch, it's gonna yell at you, it's gonna throw an error or something like that, just to make sure that you definitely give it the dispatch. So the first step is definitely to give it a generic. So before this parentheses, you simply need to give it the T or C or whatever, it's just a letter, okay, convention. And as you can see in here, whenever you want to create a context, you need to give it an object like this, which can have several key values like hex, color, dispatch, blah blah blah. So the first thing, we want to make sure that T is not undefined or null or never. Okay, we want to make sure that it is at least an empty object, so we can do some checks on that. All right, so we are going to say extends T extends like this. Yeah, now it's good. So the very least for the T, the generic we're passing here, that it needs to be an object, and based on the values, of course you can have some nested values or any other values inside this object, but for now it is satisfying our case to have an empty object. And now we are going to actually create an actual context. So let's call it for here context. It was color context if you remember, but now it's generic. We need to eliminate the color, just to keep it context. And then we're gonna say from React, okay, no, React, let's just get it like this, React dot create context. And as you can see, for React, inside of it we need to give it a default value. Before that, we need to define a type for the value that we're gonna give it in here. So we say it is either T, okay, that at least an object, or undefined, and we give it the value of undefined. So basically what we're saying in here, that the context that we are creating in here is going to have one of these values. It's either a T or undefined or null, but I'm comfortable with undefined. And we are going to do a check on this. We say, if it's undefined or the T is have something, stuff, blah, 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 like that. We're gonna see in a couple of minutes. So let's just keep it like this for now. And I'm going to import this React. Let me say import React from React. Yeah. As you can see in here, in the other example, when created a context using this create context, we could export it, so we could use it in other components. But in here, because it's inside this create context function that we have, we cannot export this context. All right, so we are going to create a kind of hook that makes use of this context in here. All right, so let's just call it const use context. All right, and then it's going to have some value in here. So what this use context hook is going to do is that it's going to create a color, let's call it color context for now, that makes use of React dot use context. Okay, we were doing this inside the components whenever we wanted to use the context, but we are doing it inside of here. It's kind of encapsulation. All right, and then we're gonna return that. So as a feed, we need to give it a context, and we just created it inside of here. Okay, so like this, and finally we can say return color context. Fine. So this use context hook is going to use context of this context that we created, and then it's going to return it plus we need to return two things in here. We need to return a provider. So we can use this, we can wrap our application with this context that we created, and we need to return this use context so components can make use of the values that we're trying to share using our context. Simply saying, it should be like this. The first thing is use context, this hook, and then for the provider, we are going to say context that we just created in here, dot provider. One more thing to make use is that to make this like the use state. Okay, you're all familiar with use state. It gives you only two values. It's a kind of array, but it's not an array of infinite values. It's just two values like this. Okay, to make it look like a use state thing, you can think of it like this. You say const. Okay, so this makes your array in here only having these two values, nothing more. All right. So this is the point in here. If you hover over this create context, it says that it gives you a value either, a read-only function that returns a T or undefined, and also it will give you another value, which is React provider, that also has the T or undefined. So right now, if you once again hover over this, that in our create context, oh, come on, get back, where do you go? It returns a function for the first one, use context. There is a function that has T or undefined, and also the provider is T or undefined. For solving the actual problem that we are doing all this stuff for that, is that very simple. Now we have two cases. It's either T, which is a kind of proper thing that we are expecting, or undefined. We need to eliminate the case of undefined. So we do a check. We say if we have undefined instead of the T generic, we are going to, for example, throw an error. Okay, so this create context function in here, in case you don't give it the proper T generic type, it's going to throw an error instead of returning this thing in here. And that's the solution that we are going to follow in fixing this issue. A very simple check. We are going to say inside use context, we say if our color context, okay, is undefined, which means we don't have a proper T. We want to do something like this, through new error, and instead of that, we're going to give it a message. A value must be provided to the use context. Yeah, it's not a perfect message, but you can change it if you would like, but this is kind of, how we do it somehow. So yes, basically, whenever we use this create context, we are going to create the context, and if something comes out of this use context inside this color context, then we are good. We are going to return the color context and the use context, blah, blah, blah. But if nothing comes out of it, it's still undefined, we are going to throw this error. So to verify this, because we take care of this use context, if you hover over this create context, you see that it's going to return the first value. Okay, this use context is going to only be T. If there is no T, we're gonna have an error, and etc. Of course, provider can be undefined because we are doing the check based on that, but it's nice. We have eliminated the undefined from this portion in here. Okay, so this is how our solution ended finally. Let's make use of it. Let's get back to the context.tsx, and this is where exactly the problem happened, and we have created something for this create context, but let's replace everything. So first of all, we're not going to need this create context because we had it in the other file, and let's import it actually. So let's just import the create context, the custom create context that we just created. I'm going to say create context. Let's see. Yes, I have it. Import it from there. There we go. Cool. So let me just remove this one, and this create context is actually our create context, and we're gonna not need this value in here anymore. Let me just eliminate it. Okay, and so if you hover over this color context, now it returns for us a constant array with a function for the color context state and also the provider, if you remember from the other file. So let's just get rid of this, and we're gonna say, if you just forgot about them, they are exactly in here. As you can see, you can just say use context like this, and also you can call the other one, let's just give it a name, saying context provider, like this. So we're just going to, replace this other provider with our provider that is returned from our custom create context. So far, so good. We got rid of some stuff and replaced them with our own stuff. And for continue, in the index.tsx, the color provider steals the same. We're not going to change it in here. So let's go up to the app.tsx. Now we need to use our own use context instead of this. So first, let's remove this from here, and also we're not needing this from here. And we are going to import use context of our own. Also, we don't need any arguments in here. Okay. Cool, so we fixed it in here. Let's see if we have used this use context in any other file. So we fix it the same way. I think we did it in another file. Let me check. Let me do a check and see. I think here in this folder, let me close the extra things in here. Okay, so in this file in here under the common color change, we exactly use the same use context. Let me just get rid of this use context from here. Come on. Also, you're not needed. Not even you. And let's import it from our own context file. And the error is gone. So this is just another beneficial examples that you can see why we created our own hook, because it's encapsulated in here in this context. We have done everything inside of here. Okay, the other components do not care about the process of creating the context and giving it any default values. Okay, they just simply do, hey, you know what, I need a dispatch, so let's do it like this. Destructure the dispatch from the use context. So if in case somewhere in the time you wanted to use something other than the context API, for example, you wanted to migrate to Redux, you don't need to go over all your application and actually change the codes, because all your components in your application, React application, are something like this. They are encapsulated with the hook. So you only need to change the codes of your use context hook, for example, inside of here. So this is a good example also of encapsulating the logic of your application. And to verify this idea is that we did not need to import any use context and create context from React. We simply did this small, lovely import, use context from our own file, which is named context. I think I made the point here. And finally, I think we are now ready to reveal it in the browser, see if it's working. Okay, now if I click any of this, it needs to dispatch using our new logic, right? It should change the color using the dispatch action. Yo, it's working. Nice, nice. Very nice. Okay, so as you can see, we solved the issue of, having that conflict in the creating the context, as you can see in here, using this logic. And of course, we get rid of that as keyword thing that was somewhere around in here. And the whole idea was to create our own create context like this. And we just, using the generics feature of TypeScript, we had to control in case we don't have the proper values for our create context and etc. So that was just an example of how to use TypeScript for creating a custom create context and how it can help us, along with some other things that we learned along this journey. So now it's only up to you. If you're against casting using the as keyword, this is how you may want to fix your problem. But if you think, oh, why to have all these kind of codes and for just a small as keyword, let's just have as keyword, and I'm sure that I am not going to fall in the trap of undefined or any other things. So this is how we do it like this. And we also mentioned that using this kind of encapsulation is good because maybe in some point of time you decided to not using context API and let's say you want to use Redux. So to have it even more encapsulation, we can even make it go further, okay? As I am going to show you exactly right now how to encapsulate the state management code of your React application and do not expose it, only expose generic React hooks so other components can consume. So whenever you want to change something, you only change the codes behind those custom hooks. Because as you can see, now we are exporting our use context and everybody can find out that we are using context API, not Redux. Okay, so let's have some example of how to make this more encapsulated. For instance, we are calling or we are consuming the hex color is a string value in different places of this demo project. We can create a custom hook for that specific value. For example, we can call it const use hex color. You know, this is just about hex color. It doesn't imply if it's a context API or is it Redux or whatever. It's very much generic. And you can say it like this, okay? It is going to say, let's destructure the hex color from where? From use context. Okay, because our hex color is inside these use context. And then it's simply going to say return the hex color. That's simple. So anywhere in your application you need to display or use the hex color value, you are going to use this hook in here. Use hooks hex color instead of using these use context. So this is more encapsulated and you are hiding the real business logic, which is your context API behind the scenes and not sharing it with all over the place in your project. And even you make it go further because we need some components. You are going to need the dispatch, right? So you can simply say const use dispatch. Okay, so just dispatching or firing an action. Despite how is it going to be fired using context API or Redux, okay? They don't care about it, the other React components in our projects, okay? So let's say exactly the same thing somehow, but in here we're going to say dispatch and use context. And of course, we're going to say return the dispatch. And if you hover over it, you will see that use dispatch is going to give you a dispatch of the color actions. That's all they will know about the outsiders, okay? All the logic of our state management is being encapsulated and hidden, okay, inside of this file, and it's really easier to manage it this way. Plus, your entire application will be much more type safe, and they don't need to deal with types and stuff like that. It's everything in one place. And even you can go further and make some specific dispatches, for example, for updating the hex color or updating the RGB color, and export them exactly as you do, as we written in here. So it's really powerful. Composing the TypeScript with this pattern is that whenever, as I mentioned before, if you want to change from context API to Redux, nothing going to change in your application. If you want to switch back from Redux to context API, again, nothing going to happen or change in all of your React application. They don't care about the process that you are going to take in here. And this is very much great for maintaining projects and large code bases. So in TypeScript, both types and interfaces are used to define the shape of data, but they have some differences in their behavior and usage. Interfaces are commonly used for defining the structure of objects and classes. They help you define what properties and methods an object should have. They are especially useful when you want to define a contract or blueprint for objects that will share common properties and methods. Interfaces can be extended, which means you can add more properties or methods to them later if you need. This makes them more flexible and extensible. Types. Types are also used for defining the shape of data, but they can be used for more than just objects and classes. They are often used for defining specific types like functions or creating aliases for complex types, which can be handy for readability and reusability. Unlike interfaces, types cannot be reopened or extended to add new properties or methods. Once you define a type, you cannot add to it later on. That's simple. Now, which one to choose? Well, if you are defining a public API that you want others to extend and build upon, using interfaces is a good choice. It allows consumers of your API to add more properties or methods to your interfaces as they need. For React components specifically, the props and the states, it's recommended to use the types. This helps to maintain consistency in your code base and provides more constraints on the types used in your components. Welcome back, everybody. In this video, we're going to talk about function overloading. What does that mean? Well, TypeScript allows you to create a function and assign to it several types, several signatures. Okay, so how is that and how can it be beneficial in actual? Let's just have a very simple function, which is the add function. You give it two numbers and it is going to return the sum of those two numbers, just to give you the idea of how it looks. So let's create the function with the first signature. So let's say we have function, let's call it add function. It's going to take two numbers, first, which is a number, and the second number, which is also a number. And this function is going to return a promise with a number. So this is the function that we have first of all, and it is the add function, which let me fix this here. This is B. Okay, what is this? It says function implementation is missing are not immediately following the declaration. Well, this is going to be gone when we use it somehow. The other one, which is also named, so when we overload a function, the name is going to be the same, but the signature is going to be different. Also, it's going to receive a number and also a second number. Let's call it again B. And this time, this is going to receive a function, a callback function, which we're going to give it a type just a minute. And for this fn, we need to tell it, we're going to have a type. Let's call it callback type, for example. And it's going to be a function that receives a number. Let's call it result. And the result is going to be number. And definitely void, because it's not going to return anything. So let's see what we have in here. So I just missed this, like this. Okay, right. So the type of this callback function that we are going to receive like this. As you can see in here, the second signature of the function in here is void. Okay, and it's also receiving a callback function. And we can also define another, perhaps, body for this, which can be a function add, and it's going to have everything inside of this exactly in here, but this function is going to be this time like this. Okay, optional. All right, the operation is going to be let's call it the result, which is A plus B. And if we have a function, a callback function, we say if we have a callback function, we're going to return, or we're going to call the callback function with the result like this. Else we're going to return the promise dot resolve the result, something like that. Oops, this is going to be return. So as you can see here, we have created a function with the same name with different signatures, as you can see in here. So whenever you want to call it, you can say, for example, add, well, you can say 2 and 3. Okay, this is going to be, for example, this one, because this also can receive a callback function, like saying, let's say it receives a result, which is a number, and definitely it's going to do whatever, just console log the result or something like that. So just a callback function that you can pass to it. So the basic idea is here that we can create a function with different signatures that is going to be called overloading a function using TypeScript. Now, if you are confused on how exactly things are going on in here when it comes to function overloading, plus to make you a better mentality of partial applications like this we have, I have a practice for you. Okay, so this is going somehow an exercise for you. I'm going to paste a code in here and explain for you your mission. So I have counted it for you in here. Imagine that the thing that you are going to create is a function. Of course, it's going to be using the overloading feature of TypeScript. So the add function, if you give it two numbers, it's going to return the sum of them. For example, 3 and 2, it's going to return 5. If you give it a single number, it's going to return a function that accepts the second number, like this. So if you give it a single number like this in here, add 3, it's going to return you a function. So this is going to be a function. And when you give the newly returned function a new number, it's going to sum the previously received plus the new number. 3 plus 5 is going to be 8. All right, I give you a few seconds. Go and try to do it using the piece of code that I just wrote for you in here. I'm going to perhaps Control Z and paste it in here for you. So please do the add function using the function overloading and get back to me so we do it together. Okay, welcome back. So we are going to create the first signature of our add function in here. I'm going to say we have a function, let's call it add. If it receives a number, a single number, it's going to return another function that is going to receive a second number, let's call it b, which in turn is going to return a number that is supposed to be the sum of the two numbers. The second signature is very simple. It says if we call the add function with two numbers like a and b, simply it's going to return a number, sum of them. The third signature, which is going to be kind of fun, it says, well, we have to receive a number, but the second number b is going to be optional. Okay? And based on that, what we are going to return is either a number. So in case you give it two numbers like a and b, it's going to sum them and it's going to return a number. Oh, I just made a mistake perhaps. No, it's the same, just eye contact. So it is going to return a number. Okay, like this case in here, we have two numbers. So if the optional number b has not been received as an argument, it's going to return, okay, the type of the thing that is going to return for you is another function receiving b, the other number, and of course it's going to return you a number in that case, which is the sum of them. Let me just fix this in here. This is going to be, I believe, like this. Okay. So the first thing is that I am going to check the b. If the b or the second number is undefined, okay, so if b is undefined, I'm going to return another function, okay, that receives b, which is a number, and is going to return the same function add, but this time it's going to give it the a and b. Otherwise, it's going to return a plus b. Okay, so let me get rid of that from here and test it somewhere else. So for testing all the thing in here, we say add 5, and then we say 9, which is going to add 5. Here we give it a single number. So based on this, it's going to return a function that receives the second number. So this is actually a function that receives the second number in here, which is 4. And then it says add A and B. A and B is 5 and 4. Add A and B. So this is supposed to be 9, okay? And here we have 6. We give it 3 and 3. It is going to be this case, and it's going to return actually this part, A plus B, which is 6. Okay, let's run it first. And yes, as you can see here, we have 9 and we have 6 for the second case. So this is how we use the function overloading, and sometimes, some cases, it may help you solve a problem during your journey developing a ReactJS application. Hello everybody, welcome back. In this section we are going to talk about component patterns, some of the component patterns that are common in React development. We're going to start with the HOC, and I'm going to give you a practice in here, then we will continue on the solution. So what is a higher order component? We are going to explore an example, a very simple example project in here, just to tell you what is your homework and what is the concept we're going to teach you. So in this code that you can find attached to this lecture, we have here two files, position.tsx and the getPose. GetPose is nothing, just separated this function. You could have put it in the same position.tsx, doesn't matter. So it receives the mouse event, which is attached to a dev, for example, and based on that, it's going to return the X and the Y of the current position of the mouse pointer. That's simple. And of course, we are going to import it in this file, the position.tsx. It's in here imported. So what is this position.tsx? It's basically a simple functional component that in the app.tsx, we are calling it like this. Nothing special, right? So for this mouse position component in here, we are doing the logic of detecting the X and Y, or the position of the mouse. Whenever we move it over a dev, okay, it's going to detect the change in the X and Y, and then it displays it in here. If you go to the browser running this project, you will see something like this. So basically, this is the whole dev that you are seeing in the code, and this is the X and Y. Based on the change, it's going to update it. All right, let's get back to the code. So basically, this is the whole idea in here. But what is the problem? What's the issue in here? The issue is that this component, which is the mouse position, is only, or is mainly responsible for displaying this X and Y into this JSX code, okay? But as you can see, it is tightly coupled with the logic of calculating X and Y. The codes in here, the codes all over in here. Is there a way of separating them inside an outer component and then only passing the X and Y to this component? Yes, of course. We're gonna explore 3 component patterns, which is the HOC in this lesson, and then we are going to see the render props, I believe, and then we're going to see how to do this tackling using the custom hooks. So let's start with the HOC. Before that, I believe, let me just walk you through the codes a little bit in here. So in this file, nothing too fancy. Simple, we have this initial state in here, which has an X and Y. And as I told you, you don't need to define the types of this in X and Y. If you hover over initial state, TypeScript is very smart, detected the type for us. And we have a very simple reducer in here, which has the state and the action. And the action is simply has this update position action type, which is going to have a type of this string, only one case, update position whenever the mouse changes. And the payload, if you pay attention, is this utility helper from TypeScript, which is partial. So what is partial? First, if you just eliminate this from here, okay, now if you hover over this payload, you will see that it is X and Y. Why? Because you said it's type of initial state. What is the type of initial state? This is the type. And simply you said this type is going to be equal of the type of this. But what is this partial? The partial simply tells that I want you to be same as the type of this, but all of them will be optional. It's like this, This is what's happening in here. So basically, the type of this payload in here will be something like this. Let me just copy paste it quickly from here, and gonna be something like this. Okay, so the type of this payload, it'll be something like this in here. Okay, this X and Y will be optional. Why are they optional? Because this partial. So partial means take whatever type you have and make all of its keys to be partial. So what is the opposite of partial if you are interested? Required. If you want to make them, all of them. For example, if the type of this initial state were optional and you wanted to revert it to make it required, you would use required. But now let's stick with partial. All right, so we have this very simple reducer, which has this single case. In case we fire this dispatch, it's going to update the state for us. And inside our component in here, we are destructuring the X and Y and the dispatch, of course, when we have this very simple update position helper function. So this update position is a simple function which is going to be used or memoized using use callback hook. So why are we doing this? You know, it's a kind of performance thing. Okay, you can simply eliminate this and put this dispatch instead of the whole thing. But doing it like this, you know, use callback takes two arguments. The first one is the function that you want to memoize, and the second is the dependency array. So we are simply telling React only whenever dispatch changes, we want you to recreate this function. Okay, because usually sometimes in a single render, some things happen and a function like this, okay, will be initiated every time your component re-renders, which is a performance issue. Okay, if you want to prevent that, you can memoize your function using use callback hook, and of course you need to give it a type of the function that you are going to consume, the argument you are going to consume, which is the event in here. As you can see, it is going to be a mouse event handler like this. Okay, so this is about the update position. The mission of this update position is very clear. Whenever the in this dev, okay, which is the blue dev, changes or the mouse starts moving, it's going to call update position, and it is based on that going to update the X and Y using the reducer. All right, enough talking about this. I think you have the idea. And of course, at the end, it's going to return this and with the updated X and Y. What is your mission? Your mission is very simple. First of all, I want you to decouple this mouse position, turn it into a presentational component. What is presentational component? Presentational component is a stateless component. It only displays data, okay? It doesn't care about the logic. So we are going to have a higher order component that takes care of all this X and Y calculation and passes or wraps this presentational component wrapped with the X and Y. So the mission is very simple. First, you create a presentational component called display mouse position, or any other name you like, which is stateless. It only receives X and Y. And you will create a higher order component called with mouse move, which is going to do all these calculations, including this, or you can change it even from, instead of reducer, you can use a state if you like. And finally, you need to wrap the presentational component with the HOC that you created in the app.tsx. Okay, if you want a hint, you may need to use the omit utility helper in creating the HOC. You know, somewhere in the HOC, you may need to encounter this. All right, so let's pause the video here, and when you do the business, get back to me so we do it together. All right, welcome back. So let's get to it. Here, first of all, we are going to create a directory in this component folder called HOC, you know, higher order component. And inside of it, we're going to create two files. First of all, we are going to create with, or let me go with the display mouse position, for example, or display mouse move.tsx. And then we are going to have the file that says with mouse position.ts. Okay, so this is, which is such with this kind of common practice for the HOCs, is going to hold all the logic for calculating the X and Y and then passing it to the display mouse. This is the presentational part of the story. Okay, so for the presentational part, it's very, very basic and easy. Let me do a small copy pasting. So I'm going down in here, this mouse position, I'm going to copy, or let me just create it first. So say const display mouse move which is going to be like this, and definitely it's going to receive some props. We're going to take care of that in a second. For the return, we are going to have this in here. Okay, it's going to return this thing in here. So for the props, we need to figure that. The first prop is x and the second one is y. So basically we say x, y, and then we have this update position function. So let me just, change the name in here. I'm going to say, for example, on mouse move, I'm going to say on mouse move, because it's not going to be that update function. This update function is going to be moved inside the with mouse. So the better call in here will be the on mouse move. Okay, another name, something like that. So now we have yellings from TypeScript. It says, hey, what are the types in here? Okay, so this is story, or this course actually is about the TypeScript, in fact, not the HOC thing. So let's focus on solving the types. For the types, first of all, the easy part is that we can separate it just to make things clear. I'm going to create a type, and maybe we need to export it so we can use it later on in case we need it. We say type, and the name of this, which is display mouse move followed by props, is going to be something like this. So x a number, you agree? X a number. Y is also a simple number, the positions of the mouse. And the on mouse move is going to be a mouse event handler, I believe. So let me just check it. So for example, this dev in here, which has this event on mouse move, we need to give it a handler. And basically, it's very easy. It should be mouse move handler. Come on, import. Let's do it manually. Actually, I think I made a mistake in here. Let's change the name. It should be mouse event handler. No? Okay, let me do it hand. I say import this dude from React. Okay, so we are done in here. Okay, the only thing is just to mention this display mouse move props in here. Congratulations, now we have our display mouse move in place and ready to receive x and y and the handler for the on mouse move, so it displays the x and y. Now the real business is that we need to implement the mouse move with mouse position, which is going to wrap this component for us. And also we need to export this, I believe. So we say export const display. Okay, let's go to the with mouse position and see what we do here. Let's start by creating it and say with mouse position nice is going to be basically a function that returns another function that is going to return JSX, or basically stuff like that. So to memorize this is in fact completely correct to say that every HOC is a function that returns a function that returns JSX. That simple. So this is what it means in here. Let me create the body and we are going to write the types and the logic one by one. So after this, we have things like this in here. Because the component that we are going to receive as a prop in this with mouse position can be any component. We are not really sure about the type of it. We need to define a generic in here like this. So we say T, but T cannot be any or stuff like that. It needs to at least, I believe, extend the empty object. It shouldn't be undefined or anything else. If you don't specify this, you're gonna have some kind of warnings from TypeScript, so it helps to avoid some bugs related to undefined types. The main prop of every HOC is the component that is going to wrap. So we're gonna say component, and here for the type, we are going to make it something generic. We're going to say React dot component type. I think I'm going to need to remove this from here and here. Okay. So what we are going to receive with this with mouse position is a component. Okay. TypeScript says, what is the type of it? we are going to say it's going to be a React component type, and for the default value of it, we are going to pass the props, the type props of the props that are going to be received with this component, because this component itself is going to accept some, or is going to receive some props, correct? For those props, we need to specify the types. What is the type of those props? Can you guess? Very easy. The component that we are going to receive is something like this, or basically every component that is going to consume this HOC, it is going to talk about the X, the Y, and of course a mouse event handler. So we are going to import this from here, this display mouse move props, okay, and it's going to be something like this. Inside this function in here, we are going to have the argument props, which is going to have the type of T, which means we want everything that is inside of this T except whatever that exists in this type. What does it mean? It means, in simple words, I want you to remove every type, okay, that exists in this one, exclude it from this T, which is generic argument in here, and give me back everything is left into these props. Okay, why we do that? Because inside of this display mouse move props, we have X, Y, and on mouse move. We want to update them because the X and Y is changed, right? And then we will pass the updated version of them down along with these props. Fine. So for this T doing this, it's very simple. We are going to say emit. If you remember, this is the utility helper that says take everything inside the generic T except key of, let me just copy paste it from here down there. Okay, now we're ready to do the logic. For the logic, we are going to do some copy pasting. So from the original file position.tsx, we are going to take this from here, copy it and paste it in here. Let's do some imports. Actually, I'm going to use a user state in here because we're not going to need the user reducer. It's going to add extra layer of complexity. So I say use state, come on. So let's just import it ourselves from React. I'm going to say import use state from React. Okay, so we're not going to do this reducer anymore, and the initial state is also going to be inside of here, or we can simply just copy paste it here like this. Okay, so now we have our user state ready, and we're not going to need this from here. We simplify it by saying X and Y and set position. Okay, so we have this set position to update the X and Y, and we have this X and Y to read the updated values. Now for updating them, we are going to create another helper function in here that is going to be set update position, and this is going to use callback hook for memoizing a piece of function for us. Let me say like that, use callback, okay? So use callback is going to receive a function, but you need to tell it what kind of function. If you remember, the function that we are going to pass is exactly existing here. You see, I don't need to navigate, it's ready for me. So I just paste it in here, and I'm going to say that, yeah, import it from React, why not? I think from React, yes, correct. And we need to give it two parameters. First, the callback function, and then the dependency list. For the callback function, I'm going to say that you are going to receive an event, okay? And based on that event, you are going to do some stuff. And the dependency array is going to be the I believe it's going to be the set position. Okay, so whenever this set position changes, you are going to recreate yourself. Okay, this is kind of performance tackling thing. Okay, it's not mandatory, but just to add a little bit of logic in here, make it a little bit complicated. So whenever we have an event, we are going to grab the new event, which is this one, and update the X and Y. For that, the mission is very easy. We're gonna get the X and Y. Do you remember this file in here, get position? So we say get position, it's imported, yes, and simply we are going to give it the event. It's going to take care of returning the X and Y. And then when we have the new, we're going to say set position and X and Y, like this. Fine. So our helper function is completely ready. Now after this, we are going to have the return statement. Exactly after this, we're going to say return. And inside this return, we are going to return the component that is wrapped, which is this one. Component. Okay. And let's pass the props. First, we need to pass or spread any other props, props that originally come with this wrapping or presentational component that we don't care about them. They are anything other than this X, Y, and the, the handler function. Okay, how to do that? We just spread them using this spread operator in here. We say spread everything. Come on. Props. Okay, but we need to specify the type of them, so we are going to say as T, because props in here originally of type this T generic. And then we need to give it the X, which is calculated in here. The Y is also calculated in here, and finally we need to give it the on mouse move, which is the update position. That's it. Okay, so now ready to test everything. We just get back to this app.tsx and wrap everything together. We can simply create a wrapper. We can name it wrapper or any other name you like. For example, I don't know, with mouse wrapper or things like that. And first you need to mention the HOC, which is with mouse move, and feed it with the presentational component, which is the display move. Now simply you need to split it in here as a child. We say wrapper and go to the browser to test it and see if it's working. Let's verify, refresh, and yeah, it's working. So what is the purpose of having an HOC in the first place? Having HOC is good first for testability. Okay, when you loosely couple your components such as this, displaying the only, keeping this component simple for stateless, when you want to unit test it or do a test in Storybook, this will be very much easier because you don't have all the complicated logic in here in case of X and Y of mouse movement or a fetch from the API. Testing this is much easier. Plus the other benefit is that reusability. You can use this component in more than place. Okay, it has perhaps you want to get X and Y from any other location of your project, so this is more reusable. Plus also this HOC is reusable somewhere else. Perhaps you are going to need to X and Y of your mouse. This is very basic example and demonstration. Okay, don't judge me with, oh my god, how super cool, but seriously, the functionality is super cool. And what the purpose we used it in this lecture and the upcoming lectures, we will talk about other component pattern, is just to teach you how to use some TypeScript helpers like omit and other stuff like extend and blah blah blah, dealing with the TypeScript thing. In the next one, I believe we're going to talk about the render props and how to solve the same issue but with a different pattern. Welcome back everybody. So we are going to solve the same issue with our mouse position, but this time we're using the pattern which is called render props. It's a little bit older than the HOC, but it's worth mentioning. It's something powerful sometimes. So what is the idea of the render props? The idea is that you create a wrapper component which does some calculation or a fetching from the API and then spreads or passes down the result as a props to the children it receives. Very simple, very basic. So for doing that, let's create a folder. We're going to call it render props, like that. Inside of it, we're going to create a file. Render mouse, let's say, dot tsx, or tsx not bad. So first of all, we're gonna create it as a constant and we're gonna name it render mouse position or whatever name you want to give it, and it's going to look like same as a functional component. okay? But as we said, finally it is going to pass something down to children, so definitely it's going to receive children as props, children in here. And now it yells at us, TypeScript says, hey, what is the type of children? If you remember, we could do it somehow using the React node, so I'm going to do some stuff from the previous, very simple, just defining the type of this. I'm going to say type, and it is going to be basically a type that we say we have children as props, and it's going to be something like this. It's going to look like props, okay? And the props are going to have, so because the children itself is going to be, think of it as a function, okay, that is going to receive props, and the props in here are going to be defined. X is going to be a number and Y is going to be a number. Don't get confused. When we use it, you're going to be more comfortable with that. And finally, it's going to return React node. Now we need to set it in here, saying that children is going to be of this type. So if you hover over this children, it will say that it is a kind of functional component that receive props, and the type of the props, as we mentioned in the render mouse position props itself, I'm going to fix it, it's not like that, number and stuff. So let's just give it props to keep the standards. Yeah, like that. Come on. Okay, so we are good to go. Now our children are ready. There are some little bit of issues with this. I'm going to fix later on. So the first thing, we need a state saying that position, and for setting the position from use state, and of course the initial state is going to be x0 and y0. Okay, very well. Then we are going to use our update position helper. Once again, we say update position, which is just a simple function, and we're going to set the type for it, not bad. Mouse event handler from React, and it's going to receive an event, same as always. And simply, whenever the event changes and this is going to get fired, it's going to say set position, and from there it's going to say x going to be event dot, let me see, x, and y, I believe it's going to be event dot y. This is x, not page x. Let me see. Yeah, sorry, this is definitely needs to be client X, and here we have client Y. Fine, so our X and Y based on this are ready. Our event handler for the mouse movement is ready. So yeah, we just need to pass it to the children. That's simple. So finally you need to say return. And inside of this, we are going to return the dev in here, just like this. And for the dev, I'm going to give it some class name just to have some styles. And it's going to be relative container, I believe that's correct. And on mouse, on mouse move, we are going to say update position. And inside of it, we are going to have our beautiful children components, children. And for each children, we are going to give a set of x, which is going to be position dot x, and y is going to be position dot y. So as a wrap up, we are doing nothing but doing all the calculation related to our business logic, for example, the x and y of our mouse event, okay, inside of a render. You can say render component, whatever you like, using this pattern. And then we are going to pass the result of our calculation in case x and y, all right, to the children. So for using this component in here, we simply need to go back to our app.tsx. Inside of it, we are going to say render mouse position. And inside of it, as the children, okay, this is everything that comes in here is that children, remember? So what do we need to pass to these children? If you hover over it, it will says it receives an X and Y, which is we are passing it in here after everything. So definitely here, for doing this, we are going to say we have X and Y received in here, and finally we are going to return something. Okay, let me just keep things cleaner in here. I'm going to create a file. Let's call it, for example, children, let's say children, or no, let me say display mouse.tsx, same as the previous HOC example. I'm going to say const display, come on, what's going on, display, let's name mouse position. For keeping it short, it's going to receive X and Y, and as you know, both X is going to be a number and Y is also a number, and finally we have this down in here. So it is going to return simply. Let me get back and do some copy pasting from this position in here. Okay, so it is going to return this section. Very well. So I'm going to say you return this, and the X and Y are the same. Not confused? Of course, everything is just repeated. We need to export it, of course, from here. Now, instead of writing all of these things in here and make it like a messy thing, just keep things cleaner, huh? I'm going to say display mouse position, and we need to pass the X and Y, which is, I'm going to say X is going to be the X and Y is going to be the Y. Okay, or as you have attached to the lecture, you can keep the code simply from here and put it in here and then call it in here. So I just separated the file for you. Okay, as a wrap up, I'm not gonna take your time in here. It's very simple. This is the render props pattern. Now you learned about the pattern itself, and also you learned about some of the, not something very much new related to props. I mean, type of props in here, but that was something like this. So how you deal with children inside render props and stuff like that. Hello dear students, and welcome back. So in this video we are going to solve, or to be more precise, to make the mouse position example clear, or I mean cleaner, more simpler and stuff like that, more reusable or testable, whatever you call it, using another common pattern which is named custom hooks. I'm sure all of you are aware of it and know how to use it, but let's do it using TypeScript and see if we can grasp any TypeScript related knowledge about it. So the first plan that we have is to create a directory here. We call it hook. Now inside of it we're gonna say a new file, use what to name it, let's say mouse position dot, very hard name to say. Okay, inside of it we are going to create our beautiful custom hook. It's very simple, going to be something related, but just let's do it together once as a plan, right? Yeah, so we're going to call it use mouse position, and it's going to take 0 arguments. Now inside of it everything is going to be a repetition. We are going to steal some stuff, I believe. First let's create a use state for ourselves, or yeah, let's just do it here. I say X and Y, and for setting the position I'm going to say why do that? Let's just copy paste everything, huh? Do you like copy pasting? I like it so much because it saved me time. So let's do it from here. Yeah, from here I'm going to say boom, initial state. I don't need you. I can say X 0 and Y 0, and of course for the user state, which is yelling yeah like that. Oh, come on. So let's do it manually. VS Code sometimes get mad at me, so no problem, I do the business myself. From React, yo, we're ready here. Okay, So what is the next step? Is to update the position. For doing that, I believe maybe we can do some other copy pasting in here. Yeah, it has a callback, so because we are going to use it and to prevent any wasted renders or repeating in renders, let's just keep things like this. Okay, again, VS Code not importing, no problem. And we are taking this also for the import, and we are going to import get position. Come on, yeah, good. So yeah, everything is repeated, you know. If you need any explanations, I think you find it a lot of it in the last 2 videos. So we have this update position, the X and Y is ready. Now we simply need to return everything. So we say return, and like an object, let's say X, Y, and of course we say on mouse move, we are going to tell it update position, like that. Now let's consume it. For consuming this, for example, let's assume in our app.tsx we want to consume this use mouse position. For that, we simply can say constant, let's destructure the X, Y, and on mouse move, I believe, and we are going to say use mouse position, of course. Very well. And inside of this, let me do some other copy pasting from get position, for example, or even inside this one, I can take this section or the whole thing from here, copy it, and I'm going to paste it. And now the on mouse is ready, X is there, and Y is there. Okay, so let's verify that on browser and see if it's work. Yeah, sounds things are good. Let's refresh. So congratulations, now you know how to use some of the very most patterns, component patterns in React using TypeScript. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach me in the QA section. Hello and welcome back, everybody. So in this video we are going to talk about another let's say pattern or perhaps feature you can achieve using TypeScript and of course React. For example, in this very small demo project, we have 2 small nice buttons, the primary button, let's assume, and secondary button. And perhaps you have another button like destructive button or try-tree button or anything, but just keep things simple. We have just 2 buttons in here. For the code, we have a simple component in here, the button, which you pass children to it. In this case, it's only string, as you can see here. We just have strings. And the type of it, and based on the type you have to give it class name. Okay, so the class name is the type that you pass to it. If you pass it primary, it's going to be primary styled or secondary styled, and the style I believe is in the app. Yes, it's in here, so that you can check the CSS if you like. But there is an issue. What if I say like this? Is this correct? If you see, the result is like this, you know. Is this secondary or primary? Nobody knows. So this is an issue. I want to have a feature that somehow limits the combination of props. Okay, if you have primary, then you cannot have secondary, and if you have secondary, you cannot have primary. I need some kind of hint to be given to the developers that are working on this project. Let's assume that if they do something like, you know, secondary and primary, TypeScript would give them, like, yell at them, you know, say, hey, you know what, you should have only one type, you know, primary or secondary, you cannot have both. Some feature like that. To be simple, how to limit the composition of props on a component. For doing that, let's get back to our button.tsx and start working on this. So the basic idea is that we are going to have a function that is going to build the class name for us. Okay, it's going to read the props that you pass to it in here, and based on Boolean values, true or false, it's going to generate the class name for us. And the class name that is going to be generated is going to be only primary or secondary or any other value that you have. Okay, it's just one from the list. For that, let's come in here and say const, let's say build class names, or let's give it like this, names. And why do we say it like this, building class names? It's because our styles are based on class names. Okay, in any other condition you can figure it out yourself. It's not gonna be that difficult. So we are going to have in here classes, so you need to pass an argument classes, and definitely you are going to be yelled at by TypeScript says, hey, what's the type of a classes? We are going to tell it that classes is going to be an object of keys and value. The key of each item is going to be string, for example, primary, secondary, tertiary, and the value is going to be a boolean, true or false. If primary is true, then the rest of the crew are going to be false. For example, if primary is true, the secondary should be false. Or if that later one is true, the other or the first one is going to be true, something like that, or false. Let's just keep it like this and don't get confused. We are going to do it in action and you will find out what's going on in here. So, and at the end we are going to return a string, which is the final class name we are going to give to our button. And inside of it we are going to do something very simple. First of all, let's create a variable. We say class name, or names, or whatever you want to give it a name in here. It's an empty string. We are going to loop or iterate through the classes, which is an array of or just an object actually of key and values. So we are going to say for const, okay, say we have key and value of object dot entries, pure JavaScript, and from classes, like this. And inside each round that we loop, we want to do a check. If the value, okay, the boolean is true, it means that, for example, if the key is primary, for example, and the value of it is true, then we want to include it in the class names, correct? And we are going to say, in that case, class names should be key, which is primary, secondary, whatever, plus, let's keep it like this for now. I think I'm gonna need it. At the end, of course, we are going to say return class names dot, let's trim it for now. Okay, so now our build class names is complete. Let's see how to use it. For using it, inside our button, which is going to be exposed, we are going to receive a few props. The first prop is children, and right now in this example our children are going to be only simple strings. We are not going to receive any other, let's say other primitive like number or a React component as a child, just the strings. That's why we're saying children as a string in here. And other than that, we are going to receive actually two possible values, either primary or secondary. Okay, so we are going to say in here we are expecting to receive primary or secondary. All right, and for each value of them, let's give them a default of false and also a default in here of false. But it's yelling at us, it says it's not in your types. Let's define a type in here for our props of the button. On the top on there, we are first creating a type for the button props. Okay, this is the very basic type that despite we are passing the primary or the secondary, okay, we need it for the children, and that is going to say let's just take it from here. Children is going to be string. So the first thing we need is to say button props. What's going on here? Button props, it should be visible. Okay, and we are going to give it, oh, I think I missed something in here. I just need to give it cool braces, I believe. Yeah, so let's do it like, let me do a check. What do we have? I think we need to remove this one and this one. Let me get rid of this and this. Okay, so now the very basic type that our button needs for the props is button types, and we are going to figure out what type our other props are going to have. And here is the trick. So we are going to define two other types for our button. The first one, primary, is mandatory, secondary is optional. And the other one, which we can call it the secondary button props, the primary is optional, the secondary is mandatory. How to do that? Very, very simple. We are going to say primary button props. Okay, we are going to say primary to be Boolean, of course, and secondary, which is also a Boolean, is going to be optional, which means whenever it is this type, okay, the consumer of this button component needs to provide the primary, but secondary is optional. Okay, for the other button, we are going to say type secondary button props. We're going to say exactly the same, but this time, oh, sorry, I just missed something in here. I will tell you what. I will just tell you. Okay, so in the secondary button props, primary is a Boolean, in fact, and in here, for the primary, we said that when you provide the primary, you tell your button component in here that you want it to be primary. It shouldn't allow you to have a secondary type at the same time. So this is not going to be Boolean. This is going to be, let's say, never, okay, which is, you know, you should never provide it. And also in the other case, whenever in our secondary button props type, our secondary is true, primary needs to be never. So I don't know if you get it or not. Let's just keep it like this, and we are going to use it in action and see. So down in here, we are going to say, so first, you button component, first of all, you need to have the button props base type, and also you need to have either primary button props or secondary button props, like this. Okay, and now instead of this type in here, we are going to say remove this, and inside this button body, we are going to say const class names. We are going to consume that build class names function that we just created, and we are going to pass to it the props. As you can see, it needs to be key value, so we say primary and secondary. So whenever we pass this, okay, based on that, it's going to create them for us, and also TypeScript is going to take care of yelling at the consumer of the button. If you provide both of these true, it's going to yell at you and says only one of them is, based on the types that we defined in here. So at the end, we are going to say class names. Let me save it. Does not exist on button props. Why doesn't? Oh, I think I missed children. No, this is correct. So what's the issue? I think that the issue, oh, this needs to be outside. I just saved it on mistake. Okay, and this needs to be removed. Now I think we are on the road. Let me just check it. Let me give it something else in here. Okay, now we should be good. Yes, so let's go and test it. Now in here, you need to specify whether it is a primary button or a secondary button. How to do that? Very simple. For the primary, you can either say primary, you can keep it like this, or for more readability, you can say primary to be true. Okay, because it's a value, but you can just keep it simple, and if you want to say, you can say it like this, primary. So this is primary and this is secondary. Okay, as you can see, refresh and get back to the browser, it's working. Okay, now the magic. Imagine that by accident you tell it, okay, I want to primary and be secondary. See, this is the thing. It's yelling at me. It says type children string primary blah 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 is not assignable, and it needs to be one of them. Types of property secondary are incompatible. So it shows you an incompatible of secondary and primary. It says you cannot have secondary here. You can either have secondary or primary. So as a wrap up, this is how you can limit the prop composition or combination in a component using, for example, because here we have this kind of style examples, and based on the class names, we did a build class name thing in here that iterates over the object of primary and secondary, which is coming from here, and here we feed it. But the more important piece is the types that we defined in here by being optional, one of them, and also putting it to never. It's going to set TypeScript to do that kind of yelling that we want it in case anything goes against what we expect.